He woke not to sound, but to the absence of it, the kind of silence that does not comfort, but waits. His eyes opened to a ceiling of glass panels veined with rust, through which no sun entered, only a diffused pallor, like the world had forgotten how to measure day. He sat up slowly. Beneath him stretched a wooden bench worn smooth by the weight of countless travelers who were no longer here. The floor was tiled with squares of white and black, scuffed, cracked, some missing altogether. Dust lay thick, yet the air was not stale. It was alive with suspension, as though breath itself had been arrested mid-inhale. He rose. His footsteps echoed, but not in rhythm. Each echo returned late, early, out of time. Then he saw them, the clocks, dozens, perhaps hundreds, mounted along the high walls of the station. No two alike, brass-faced, iron-framed, some ornate with gilded numerals, others simple and stern. Their hands all pointed to different hours. Some stopped at 1/4 past, others at midnight, others frozen in the fragile space between 2 seconds. None ticked, none moved. The traveler felt his chest tighten. Time itself had stopped, but not with unity. It had shattered into fragments, each clock a shard of a broken mirror. He stepped closer to one, a tall pendulum encased in glass. Its waiter rested in mid-swing. He placed his hand on the case, expecting cold. But it was warm, faintly pulsing. Not dead, then. Waiting. He whispered, though no one was near. What happened here? No answer came, only the faint hum of silence itself. He moved down the platform. Empty signs hung above the tracks, letters peeled away. Benches sagged under the weight of absence. The rails stretched outward in a mist, endless, purposeless. He felt a pang of fear. Had he woken in the ruins of the world? Then sound, soft, metallic, like a pocket full of coins shifting. He turned. A child stood at the far end of the platform. Small, hair dark and tangled, eyes wide with a brightness that seemed unafraid of the silence. Her pockets bulged, and with each movement they jingled faintly. In her hands, she held a ring of tiny gears, springs, fragments of time itself. She walked toward him, steps sure, unhurried. "You woke," she said simply, as if she had been expecting him. The traveler swallowed. His voice came rough. "Where am I?" "The station where time stopped," she answered, as though this were the most obvious truth. She held out her hand. Resting in her palm was a small coiled spring, no bigger than a walnut, yet glowing faintly from within. "You'll need this," she said. He hesitated. The spring seemed alive, almost breathing. Its glow pulsed faintly, like a tiny heart. "What is it?" he asked. Her smile was small, secretive, a Molinique key. "Not for doors, for hours. People think time breaks at the hands." She glanced at the rows of frozen clocks, but it phrased at the promises. He took the spring carefully, its weight far greater than it appeared. It was warm, humming against his skin. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Carry it, until you remember." She stepped back, her pockets clicking with tiny gears. "Remember what?" She tilted her head, eyes gleaming. "That time is not kept by clocks. It is kept by vows." Before he could speak, she turned and pointed to the far track. Through the mist, faint light shimmered, forming a thread across the rails. Not a train, but a trail of radiance, winding away into unseen distance. "That's the way," she said. "Follow the seconds. They'll take you where you're meant to go." He stared at the glowing track. It pulsed gently, as though inviting him. "And you?" he asked. The child only shrugged, jingling. "I'll be here, fixing the smaller things. The great ones, you'll have to mend yourself." He wanted to ask her name, but something in her gaze told him it would not matter. Names belonged to hours, and hours had stopped here. He slipped the spring into his pocket. though he could still feel its warmth against his palm. Then, with a final glance at the rows of silent clocks, he stepped onto the glowing path. The air trembled. The silence shifted, no longer oppressive but expectant. The mist ahead parted slightly, revealing more of the radiant track. He walked. Each step echoed, not with delay now, but with rhythm, his rhythm. The path responded, lighting beneath his feet, brighter with each pace. Behind him, the station did not vanish, but faded into stillness, a place of pause waiting to be remembered. The child's voice carried faintly from the distance, no louder than the turning of a gear. Every moment is a vow. He pressed his hand to his pocket, feeling the spring pulse. His breath steadied. The mist thickened, but the track glowed brighter, a thread unrolling through the unknown. He followed, because following is what seconds are, one consenting to the next. And though the station receded behind him, the clocks unmoving, he felt the first subtle truth awaken within. Perhaps time had not stopped. Perhaps it was waiting for him to learn how to begin. The mist pressed close around him, soft and heavy, but the track of light kept its line steady, a thread of radiance through the unknown. Each step set it glowing brighter, as if his consent were fuel. The air smelled faintly of metal and rain, though no storm had touched this place. He glanced back once. The station was already swallowed in haze, its forest of silent clocks vanishing into distance. Only the faint chime of the child's pockets lingered in memory, like a metronome too far away to hear, but still shaping his pulse. The spring in his pocket throbbed faintly. Not enough to guide, but enough to remind. He touched it with his fingers, and the warmth steadied his breath. The rail beneath him was no longer iron but glass, smooth and translucent, glowing from within. Beneath it flowed, not shadow, but tiny sparks, countless, racing like minnows in a stream. Seconds, he realized with awe, the light was not a path at all. It was the river of time, visible at last. As he walked, he leaned closer. The sparks flickered with color, not only white. Some shone gold, others blue, others red. Some dim, some bright, but all racing forward in the same current. He whispered to himself, "Every second is alive." The rail hummed, as if agreeing. After some time, though time had no measure here, the mist thinned. He emerged into a cavernous hall with walls arched high, ribbed with iron beams. It resembled a cathedral stripped of saints, built not for prayer, but for waiting. The luminous rail cut through its center, spilling radiance across the stone floor. The hall was filled with benches, though broken, tilted, some overturned. Abandoned suitcases rested in corners, leather cracked, handles missing. He felt an ache, as though each belonged to someone who had departed without them, or perhaps never departed at all. Above the benches, more clocks, not frozen now, but spinning wildly. Some hands whirled like mad compasses, others jerked forward, back, forward again. A few spun in reverse, swallowing minutes instead of giving them. He stopped dizzy. The motion was unbearable, a storm of false hours. He pressed his hand against his pocket, clutching the spring. Its warmth steadied him, reminding him that his path was not in the chaos above, but in the light beneath. He stepped forward. The rail pulsed brighter, anchoring him. At the far end of the hall, he saw movement. A figure, tall, cloaked in gray, standing beside a pillar of fractured stone. The figure lifted its head as he approached, but no face showed, only a clock dial, cracked, hands twitching aimlessly. The traveler froze. The figure's voice came not from a mouth, but from the grinding of gears. Late. Always late. Hours wasted. Moments spilled. You are too late. The words echoed through the hall, rattling the benches, stirring dust. The traveler's chest clenched. He thought of nights squandered in distraction, mornings spent in bitterness, years where love could have been offered but was withheld. He felt shame sink its claws into him. The figure stepped closer, its dial face spinning erratically. Do you think the rail will carry you? It shows what you have lost. Look, the glass rail beneath his feet flickered. For a moment he saw sparks dim, extinguishing before they reached the far end. Seconds he had wasted, choices he had denied. He swayed, almost stumbling off the path, but the spring pulsed fiercely in his pocket. He clutched it and whispered, through clenched teeth, "Even wasted time is mine. I will not deny it." The figure shuddered, as if struck. Cracks spread across its dial. It hissed like a kettle, stepping back. The rail glowed brighter, overpowering the vision of extinguished sparks. "You are not late," said a voice. Not the figure's, but softer, near his ear. "You are here." The gray figure faltered, crumbled inward like ash, and dissolved into the mist. The hall fell silent again, save for the gentle hum of the rail. The traveler collapsed to his knees, breath ragged. He whispered to himself, "Every moment is a vow." Even now, he rose slowly. The suitcases in the corners seemed less forlorn now, as though waiting had turned to patience. Even the mad clocks above slowed, some stopping, some aligning faintly toward coherence. He walked on. The hall gave way to open air. He stepped out onto a vast plain where the rail curved forward like a ribbon of light stretching to the horizon. The mist here thinned, revealing glimpses of towers far ahead, faint, crystalline. His chest tightened. Was that the city? Or another illusion? The rail pulsed, urging him forward. As he walked, he noticed shapes scattered across the plain. At first he thought them stones, but as he drew near he saw they were hourglasses, half buried in sand. Some upright, some toppled, some cracked. Their sands did not fall. He knelt beside one. Within it shimmered not grains, but memories. A moment when he had chosen love over anger, and another when he had turned away. Both frozen, locked in glass. He touched the surface. The spring pulsed, and the sand inside stirred. For an instant the choice replayed, not as memory, but as possibility alive again. The glass warmed, then cooled. He whispered, awed, "Nothing is lost." He rose, his pace steadier, the horizon brighter. The rail curved onward, pulling him towards something vast, unseen. He knew now the station was not behind him. It was within him. And ahead lay not time to be measured, but time to be reconciled. The mist thickened once more, but the glow of the rail was steady. He walked, and with each step the spring pulsed, as if keeping rhythm with a clock deeper than any dial, the clock of his consent. The mist kept to its patience, closing and parting as if it too were made of breath. The rail of light held its course with the serenity of something that knows where it is going without needing to announce it. He walked, and each step answered a question he had not thought to ask. Will you be here for the second? And this one? And this? A faint tint began to touch the glow, green, then amber, then red, like the memory of signals. The rail widened into a kind of yard, not of trains, but of choices. Slender masts rose on either side, each crowned with lenses of colored glass. None shone steadily. They quivered between hues as if awaiting a decision. A small house sat beside the yard, brick and wood with a roof that had learned the shape of rain. Its window was open. From within came a sound, not quite ticking, not quite breathing, something between, the cadence of a metronome that had found a pulse it respected. He moved to the door. It was ajar. He did not knock. Inside, a figure sat at a narrow table, back turned, sleeves rolled, hands resting atop a long brass lever connected to the field of signals. The figure's hair was white, cut close. His eyes were closed. Yet, as the traveler stepped over the threshold, the man spoke with the asking kindness of someone greeting a late friend. "You came while the lights were deciding," he said. "Good. They prefer honesty to haste." The traveler swallowed. "What is this place?" The man's hand stayed on the lever. "The switchyard of attention. Seconds are plentiful. Where you send them is scarce." He opened his eyes. They were clear and unaccusing. "Your lights are flickering. You have been trying to look in 3 directions at once." Through the window, the lenses trembled green, amber, red, green, like leaves unwilling to settle. "I didn't mean to," the traveler said. The man's mouth tilted, almost a smile. "Meaning and sending are different crafts. Sit." A stool waited. The traveler sat, the spring warm in his pocket like a small animal that trusted him enough to sleep. The man gestured toward the yard. "Each lens answers one vow. Not the vows you speak to impress, but the ones you prove by hour." He slid the lever a breath's width, and a single mass steadied to amber. When you scatter your gaze, the lights panic. When you choose, they align. Choose badly, they still align. The world suffers when you pretend not to choose. The traveler let the words settle. "How do I choose rightly?" The man turned the question with a slow tilt of his head. "First you choose fully." Riley learns from that. Half choices make red light without relief. He gestured toward the field, where several lenses blinked their exhaustion. "Place your hand on the lever." The brass was cool. The rails glow sang up through the wood of the floorboards and into his arm. He closed his eyes, not to escape the sight, but to find the source. The spring answered, pulse to pulse. "Name one vow," the signalman said, voice as steady as the lever. "A small one you can keep in the next hour, not a grand one you will fail by sunset." The traveler's throat tightened. He could offer promises like fireworks. He had often, but the yard would not be convinced by theater. He searched for what would be true even if no one saw. "I will attend," he whispered, "to what is before me." "Good," said the man. The traveler moved the lever the measure of a sigh. Outside, one lens steadied green, then another. The amber lights softened, the red thinned like shame released. The rail brightened, a path affirmed without applause. The man's hands withdrew. "That will carry you to the next decision. Signals do not take you to eternity. They take you to the next honest minute." "Who are you?" the traveler asked. The man considered the window, as if the yard might answer first. "A keeper of intervals," he said at last. "I do not move trains. I clarify crossings." He looked back. "When you arrive at a crossing without a keeper, remember this. Haste is not urgency. Attention is love." The traveler bowed his head. "Thank you." "Say it forward," the man said, and his almost smile returned. "That is where thanks belongs." He left the house. The yard had calmed. Masts stood in their colors like trees no longer fighting the wind. The rail narrowed again, the way a river gathers itself after widening to breathe. He walked on. The plain shifted into low undulations, hillocks of ashen glass where hourglasses lay like fossils. Some had been mended with wire, their seams honest and strong. Others waited with mouths chipped, asking nothing more than recognition. He did not stop to fix them. He had learned that not every wound asks for his hand. Some ask for his steadiness. The air cooled. The glow ahead lifted slightly, as if the rail were climbing. A notch appeared in the landscape, a cut in the ground where fog pooled like milk. The path ran straight to it and then, to his surprise, did not bridge it with light. It stopped at the lip and shimmered, as if uncertain whether to leap. He stood at the edge. The gap was not wide. It was deep in the way unslept sorrows are deep. He waited for the trick, thread of light, hidden span, but no answer came from the world. It came from within, a small insistence he had declined all his life. Pause. He had moved through hours as if motion were proof of life. He had even repented in motion. The spring warmed against his palm, and he understood that the rail was asking not for a leap, but for a rest. He sat. He did not bargain. He did not compose a better self. He counted a breath, and then another, not aloud, not as penance, only as confession that time without pause is a lie. The pause expanded until it touched both edges of the gap. He felt rather than saw the joining, a delicate tension like silk drawn between two hooks. He stood and tested the tautness with the weight of one foot. It held. He crossed, not quickly, not grandly, each step a small consent to the truth that rests our notes. On the other side, the rail hummed its approval and resumed its forward glow. The fog thinned. He smelled oil, clean, mint-sharp, and something like wildflower, a scent the air remembers when a door to a good room opens. He knew the workshop was near before he could name it. Nearness has a temperature. The land gathered itself into a slope, and at the top the rail split into slender filaments that rose and descended in parallel, like strings on a vast instrument. Each line vibrated with pitches he could not quite hear until he laid a palm against them. They sang under his skin. Seconds were not only sparks and light. Seconds were music. At the slope's crest, the filaments braided again into a single strand that climbed a short stair carved from a stone no quarry had cut. At the stair's head stood a door of wood and brass, not ornate, not plain, wearing its years like a face wears joy and grief. Above it, a round window held a clock face without numerals, only 4 quiet marks at the quarters and 2 hands resting together at no particular hour, as if refusing to be summoned by numbers. He stopped 1 pace away. The spring warmed to a mild glow, steady and unurgent, like a small lamp held by someone who does not want you to trip. He waited. He had forced doors in other lives. This one did not offer handle or keyhole as invitation to conquest. He placed his palm on the wood. It was warm, as if from the backs of many other hands. Nothing moved. He withdrew his hand. The air was very clean. Clean air is a ceremony all its own. Behind the door, quiet sounds, fine metal touching fine metal, a cloth being folded, a pencil deciding whether to make the next mark. No one hurried. "Wind it where you promise," said a voice softly to his left. He turned. The child stood at the stair's base, pockets full of little midnights and noons, hair as wild as the first day. She was not out of breath. Tom had learned to sit with her. He looked at the spring in his palm. He had not wound it. He had carried it. Carrying had been its first instruction. This seemed to be its second. "What do I promise?" he asked. She tilted her head, studying him as if he were a dial with a new moon hiding under it. "Not forever," she said. "Forever is for artists and liars. Promise an hour." He almost laughed, and then did not, because his throat surprised him with ache. An hour is harder than forever. It asks for presence instead of poetry. He lifted the spring to his chest. To that small place a hand knows without hunting. The coil warmed, then warmed more, then sighed. He felt it as a release rather than a sound. It did not click, it consented. He whispered without planning the sentence. And perhaps for that reason it was true. "I will enter as I am," he said, "and attend." The spring gave one quiet pulse and steadied like a sleeping child who has just been convinced the dark is not a threat. The door did not swing wide. It softened. Wood does that when it remembers the tree. The brass fittings answered with a tone as honest as a bell's first breath. The hands on the blank face clock lifted a measure and settled. Not to any hour the world could number, but to now. The child climbed 2 steps, and Saturday, "People think doors prefer force," she said, inspecting a gear with 3 missing teeth and loving it anyway. "They prefer accuracy." He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need his mouth. "Will I meet him?" he asked, and only as the pronoun left did he realize he had named the watchmaker without naming. She shrugged. The pockets chimed. "Work meets workers," she said. "Go on." He looked once more at the yard behind, signals steady and calm, at the gap bridged by a woven rest, at the hourglasses that had not demanded repairing, at the rail he had followed until it became music. He did not bless the road. The road had already blessed him. He placed his hand to the door again. It yielded the last of its reluctance like a good friend letting you in past midnight. The opening that made itself was not grand. It was sufficient. Warm light lay across a floor that had known footsteps and quiet. He stood at the threshold. The scent of oil and wildflower breathed against his face. Somewhere inside, a fine file whispered to a stubborn edge, and the edge, grateful, let itself be changed. He had not stepped in yet. There is a holiness to thresholds that should not be rushed. He touched the spring one last time, not to win but to thank. It had become an emblem of something he could finally name without needing to defend. Every moment is a vow. He drew a breath that fit his chest without argument. Then he lifted his foot, and the line between outside and in remembered it had only ever been a line. The door opened with no sound of hinges, no creak of wood. It yielded like fabric that has carried warmth for years, parting not under force but under recognition. He stepped across, and the air changed at once. Inside, light breathed from everywhere and nowhere. Lamps of brass, skylights veiled by dust, glass jars with filaments glowing like trapped dawn. It was not bright in the way of noon, nor dim like candlelight. It was the light of work, steady, patient, refusing to tire. The floor was stone, worn by countless feet. Workbenches stretched in lines, each littered with fragments of clocks, springs coiled like sleeping animals, gears with teeth sharp or broken, pendulums resting mid-arc, faces of watches with no hands, hands with no faces. And yet, though disassembled, nothing felt ruined. Every piece hummed faintly, as if waiting its turn to return to wholeness. He moved slowly between the benches. Tools lay scattered, files, brushes, lenses, each resting in the posture of a task interrupted not by neglect but by pause. There was order here, but it was not rigid. It was the order of patience, of knowing the work would continue when the worker returned. At the far end of the hall stood a long table. Upon it rested an hourglass taller than a man, its frame wrought of iron and wood entwined. But the glass held no sand. Within it shimmered a current of light, rising and falling, refusing gravity. Seconds swam within like fish in a tide, darting and circling. The traveler stood before it, breath caught. He felt his own pulse quicken, then matched the rhythm within the glass. The spring in his pocket glowed warmly, resonating as if in recognition. Behind him, footsteps. He turned. The figure who entered was not the child, nor the signalman. This one was taller, cloaked in a coat of deep indigo, its sleeves dusted with filings of brass and silver. His hair was iron gray, his face lined not with age, but with focus. In his hands he carried a delicate wheel of crystal, its spokes turning though no mechanism touched it. He placed the wheel gently on a bench and looked up. His eyes were steady, neither severe nor indulgent. They carried the clarity of someone who had spent a lifetime listening to things the world had forgotten how to hear. "You arrived," he said simply. The traveler bowed his head. Words tangled in his throat. The watchmaker gestured to the benches, the tools, the fragments scattered like constellations awaiting their order. This is where hours are repaired. Not by rewinding, not by erasing, by remembering what they were given for. The traveler stepped closer, his chest aching with questions. And mine? Can the hours I lost be mended? The watchmaker regarded him, then placed a hand flat on the table. Lost is not the same as wasted. Some hours you spent without knowing their worth. Some you withheld when they were begged of you. Some you scattered, but all remain. They wait here until you learn to wind them with truth. The traveler touched the spring in his pocket. Its warmth pulsed like a heartbeat answering. The watchmaker's gaze softened. You brought it. He nodded. The child, she gave it to me. She gives one to all who wake, the watchmaker said. But not all carry it this far. Some set it aside when the weight feels foolish. Some lose it while trying to trade it for grander treasures. You carried it. That is enough. The traveler's knees weakened. He sank onto a stool, breath shuddering. I don't know how to use it. The watchmaker stepped closer, his presence calm as tide. He laid a finger lightly on the traveler's chest. You already began. Every moment you carried it honestly, it wounded itself. The question is not how to use it. The question is, to what will you vow the next hour? The traveler trembled. I don't know. Then learn. The watchmaker turned, gesturing toward the great hourglass. The workshop is not a place of answers. It is a place of practice. Time is not kept by numbers. It is kept by vows. The traveler gazed at the hourglass. The light within shimmered as though waiting for his consent. He touched the spring again and felt it pulse, steady, alive. The watchmaker's voice carried through the hall, soft yet certain. Every moment is a vow. That is the only clock that does not break. The words sank into him, heavier than stone, lighter than breath. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he heard the faint chaos of the station. The frozen clocks, the spinning hands, the gray figure whispering late, too late. But then he felt the spring's warmth steadying him, and the hourglass humming with possibility. He whispered, not to the watchmaker, not to himself, but to the seconds flowing unseen. Then let this be my vow. I will attend. I will be here. The hourglass flared briefly, light spilling into the workshop, casting long shadows that did not accuse but belonged. The watchmaker inclined his head, as if greeting not the traveler, but the vow itself. Good. Then the work may begin. The watchmaker gestured with a hand worn not by weakness, but by the patience of tools. The traveler followed as they moved deeper into the hall. The great hourglass behind them dimmed into background hum, its light settling into something steady, like a lantern left to guard. They entered a long gallery lined with shelves that stretched upward beyond sight. Upon each shelf stood glass domes, cupolas of perfect clarity, some large as urns, others small as drinking cups. Within each, a glow moved softly, swirling in currents of gold, silver, or pale blue. The traveler stepped closer. One dome pulsed faintly with warmth, like sunlight diffused through linen. He leaned nearer and gasped. Inside it shimmered a single hour. Not an image, not a frozen scene, but the sensation of an hour. The texture of voices blending, the comfort of company, the slow relief of sorrow lifted. He recognized none of the faces that flickered through the glow, yet he felt their presence. It was as if he had borrowed this hour once, though it had never belonged to him. The watchmaker spoke quietly. These are the hours of others, lent to you without their knowing. Every kindness, every patience, every listening moment. No one lives only on their own time. We live on what is given. The traveler's throat tightened. He touched the glass lightly. The glow shifted, and he felt a memory. The day a stranger had stopped to help him gather papers scattered by the wind. He had thought it nothing, had hurried on, but here under glass it glowed like a star. He stepped back, overwhelmed. All these, his voice faltered. I carry them. The watchmaker nodded. You are alive because others spent themselves on you. A second here, an hour there. Some offered without knowing your name. Some offered against their own hunger. Without their time, your time would have ended. The traveler closed his eyes. The weight of gratitude pressed on him like gravity. How many had given so he might stand here? Faces he had forgotten, gestures he had dismissed as small. They filled this hall like constellations. They walked further. Some domes glowed brightly, others faint and thin, as though the hours within were fragile. The traveler paused before one so dim he could hardly see its light. "Why is this one so weak?" he asked. The watchmaker bent low, eyes soft. Because the one who gave it did not believe it mattered. A word spoken shyly, a presence offered quietly. They thought it was too small. But here, nothing is wasted. Even a single breath given in kindness endures. The traveler felt tears rise. He whispered to the faint dome, "I remember you now, whoever you were." The glow brightened slightly, as if warmed by recognition. They moved on. At the far end of the gallery, the shelves bent into an archway carved with no hands, only shaped by time. Beyond it, the sound of water, a flowing, delicate rush. They stepped through, and the traveler gasped again. Before them stretched a river, not of water, but of seconds, countless sparks racing like drops of silver light. The current coursed steadily, splitting into tributaries that branched across the hall. And along the banks stood chairs, benches, cushions, some empty, some occupied by figures, listening intently to others speak. The traveler froze. He saw one figure lean forward, eyes open, mouth closed, listening with full presence. The sparks in the river flared brighter around them, seconds rushing into light. The watchmaker touched the traveler's shoulder. "Do you see? Time flows most freely when one soul listens to another. Listening is the work that multiplies hours." The traveler's knees weakened. He sank by the river's edge. He thought of every moment someone had truly listened to him. Not to judge, not to answer, but simply to be there. He felt again the relief, the strange expansion of breath, the way minutes seemed to open like windows. He whispered, "I have lived on these rivers all my life." I did not know. The watchmaker's gaze was steady. Most do not. They believe hours are earned by striving. But the hours that sustain are given by presence. You walk not only on your seconds, but on rivers others poured for you. The traveler cupped his hand near the current. Sparks brushed his skin like minnows, darting through him, leaving warmth. He wept quietly, tears falling into the river. They mingled with the sparks and vanished, as though returned to the current itself. The watchmaker stood silent, allowing the silence to speak. After a long time, the traveler rose, chest aching yet steadier. He looked back toward the gallery of domes, then to the river. "I have been carried more than I have walked." The watchmaker inclined his head. "Yes, that is why arrogance collapses here. No one is self-made. Every life is sustained by borrowed hours. To know this is humility. To live by it is gratitude." The traveler pressed the spring in his pocket. It pulsed, echoing the river's rhythm. He whispered to it, though he knew it was himself he addressed. "Then I vow to remember. My time is not mine alone." The river shimmered in response, brighter, as though thousands of unseen listeners had turned their heads and smiled. The traveler followed the current of light as it wound deeper into the hall. The river widened, splitting into branches that circled tables, alcoves, and small hearths. Each place seemed designed not for work, but for presence. Corners where two could sit and speak, benches where one might simply remain near another. At each branch, he noticed the same pattern. When someone spoke with truth, when someone listened with full attention, the sparks within the river multiplied. What began as a thin flow became thick with seconds, surging like flood after rain. He stopped at one bank where a woman, sat beside a child. The woman's hands rested still in her lap. She said nothing, but her eyes did not waver. The child spoke haltingly, words breaking, reforming. The river surged. The sparks leapt high, scattering like fireflies. The traveler whispered, "Their silence is building time." The watchmaker nodded. Yes, not all hours are counted by words. Some are built by attention alone. What is received grows, what is given. The traveler touched the water again. It vibrated with hundreds of voices, thousands of listenings, an ocean of unseen presence. He felt hours, not his own, pass through him. Teachers who had lingered after class, friends who had waited at crossroads, strangers who had offered a seat. Each one shimmered here. Each one had carried him further than he could have walked. They moved on. At another tributary, he saw the opposite. Two figures sat facing each other, but one's gaze wandered, hands fidgeting, mind elsewhere. The river here slowed, its sparks dull, reluctant. The one speaking faltered, voice weakening. Seconds drifted away into dimness. The traveler's chest ached. So hours could be withheld too. The watchmaker's tone was calm, not cruel. Yes, to refuse presence is to starve time. What could have grown withers? The traveler pressed his hand to his chest, remembering moments when he himself had looked away, pretended to listen, withheld the fullness of his presence. He whispered, "I stole hours." The watchmaker shook his head gently. "You left them barren, but even barren soil may one day be tilled. Remember, no refusal is final. Every second waits to be chosen anew." They continued until the river gathered again, merging into a broad channel. Here the sparks were immense, coursing like constellations drawn into flow. The traveler leaned over, astonished. Within the current, he saw scenes not his own, strangers sheltering one another, hands carrying burdens, eyes offering comfort. He realized with awe, these were hours borrowed from countless lives, pooled together, sustaining not one soul, but many. "This is the great river," said the watchmaker. "It feeds all who thirst. It is woven from the presence of the countless. You drink from it every day, though you do not see. It is why despair does not consume the world, because love continues, second by second, even where you are absent." The traveler knelt, dipping his hand into the current. Sparks leapt into his skin, flooding his chest with warmth. He felt himself nourished by strangers across centuries, held by kindnesses given in villages he had never seen, strengthened by songs sung in languages he had never spoken. He wept freely. "I thought I live on my own strength, but I am carried by rivers I never knew." The watchmaker's gaze softened. Yes, gratitude is the only honest posture before such a gift. The traveler bowed his head, whispering not to the watchmaker, not even to himself, but to the river itself, "Thank you." The water shimmered brighter, sparks dancing higher, as though the river accepted his vow and returned it multiplied. They walked further. Along the banks were alcoves with empty chairs, as if waiting. The traveler paused. Why are these places unfilled? The watchmaker's expression grew quiet. Because some hours are still awaiting givers. Every empty chair is a silence where presence was withheld. The river waits for them. It waits for you. The traveler's throat ached. He sat in one of the empty chairs. The river before him dimmed at first, still waiting. He closed his eyes, set aside the urgency to do, and simply attended, without object, without recipient. Just attention itself. To his astonishment, the river flared. Sparks rose high, singing like bells. The watchmaker nodded approvingly. Even the decision to be present multiplies hours. Attention is never wasted. The traveler rose again, steadier, more aware of the responsibility in each second. They came at last to where the great river plunged beneath the floor of the workshop, disappearing into unseen depths. A carved stone stood at the edge, engraved not with letters, but with ripples that seemed to move when he blinked. The watchmaker rested a hand on the stone. The current you have seen here is only part. It flows beneath every world, every life. Each second of attention, of listening, of love, none are lost. They are carried here, where they nourish the whole. The traveler placed his hand beside the watchmaker's. The stone vibrated softly, a hum that was not sound but recognition. He whispered, "Then every moment of kindness is eternal." The watchmaker inclined his head. "Yes, and every refusal can be redeemed." The traveler felt the spring in his pocket pulse with warmth, echoing the current. He pressed it, whispering to it as if to the hours themselves. "Then I vow to listen, to give the seconds I once withheld." The current surged, sparks leaping in arcs across the hall, illuminating even the darkest alcoves. For a moment, the whole workshop seemed alive with stars. They left the great river by a side passage that narrowed into a hush. The light here did not flow, it rested. Shelves returned, but these held no bright domes at first glance. Only lanterns with wicks unlit, glass cool to the touch, cords coiled like sleeping snakes. The watchmaker paused beside the first and breathed, and a coal deep within the lantern remembered it had been fire. A faint ember stirred, suffusing the glass with the palest orange. "What is this place?" the traveler whispered. "The gallery of vigils," the watchmaker said. "Hours kept awake for others. Some at bedsides, some in doorways, some by windows where no one ever came." He ran a thumb along the lantern's rim. "These are costly hours, the ones that say, 'I will not sleep while you are in need.'" The ember brightened as if the sentence had lifted it. The traveler leaned close. Within the lantern, the hour appeared, not as faces, but as textures, a chair's hard edge under a tired spine, the rhythm of shallow breaths in a dark room, the sound of a kettle brought to boil at an hour when only owls agree to keep company. The traveler could feel the ache in the watcher's back, the sting in their eyes. It was not heroic. It was resolute. He wanted to name the watcher as saint. The hour refused titles. It accepted only the word present. They moved down the row. Some lanterns flamed high. Others kept the soft red of bank coals. The watchmaker stopped at one, so dim it was nearly black. "This," he said, "is a vigil with no object." The traveler frowned. "How can that be?" "Some souls keep watch because the world is heavy," the watchmaker answered. "They sit in the night and give the hour to anyone who needs it. They do not know for whom. They do not require to know. The gift finds its way." He touched the glass. The coal glowed, just enough to say I was here. The traveler's chest tightened. He spoke to the dim lantern the way one speaks to a stranger who, in another country, once lifted a fallen suitcase. "Thank you," he breathed. A thread of light rose from the coal, thin as hair and strong as steel, and vanished into the rafters as if a star had remembered its path home. Beyond the lanterns, the shelves changed again. Glass domes returned, but their light was different, ruddy, pulsing like a heartbeat that had run a long distance. Inside these, scenes formed and unformed. A worker taking a second shift so that a child might sleep without hunger. A neighbor shoveling a path through snow before dawn and leaving no note. A nurse tying the loosened shoe of a patient who would never know her name. None of the givers looked up to be seen. The hours themselves did the looking. "These are hours given from want," the watchmaker said quietly. "Not from surplus. They are heavy. Many who give them believe they are nothing. The city believes otherwise." The traveler's hand rose without command. He rested his palm on one dome. The hour within pressed back like a heartbeat against a kiss. It was not his hour, yet it sustained him. He felt ashamed of the times he had demanded golden hours from those who only had copper and still gave. "Is there a ledger?" he asked, voice rough. "I have received what I did not earn. Do I owe?" The watchmaker's eyes softened with something like pity and something more like recognition. "There is no ledger," he said. "There is circulation. Gratitude transfigures debt into vow. Owing makes you small. Gratitude makes you generous. Pay forward is the only accurate arithmetic here." They walked until the shelves opened into a small round room where there were no domes at all, only shallow bowls of clear glass resting on pedestals. At first they seemed empty. Then the traveler realized they were full of silence. It had shape. It had weight. The bowls of restraint, the watchmaker said. Hours in which a word was not spoken, and that mercy saved a day. He gestured to one. Here, a father did not answer cruelty with cruelty. Here, a friend swallowed a clever wound. Here, a stranger held a door and held his tongue. These are loud hours disguised as quiet. The traveler bent over a bowl and felt on his skin the cool of withheld heat. He remembered a morning, small, almost lost, when someone had let his error pass without public correction. He had become better quicker than if he had been shamed. He had never thanked them. He did now. The silence in the bowl rang like a bell that prefers not to be struck. A corridor led on, tiled with squares of pearl and slate. On either wall, simple frames held threads of light that ran in pairs, sometimes touching, sometimes almost. The watchmaker slowed. Here is a mechanism you should meet. They entered a chamber where, on a table of oiled wood, lay an apparatus that could not decide if it were a clock or an instrument. Two arms arced toward one another, each with a small plate, each counterweight. Between them, a thin rod of glass pulsed with a faint blue, neither timepiece nor flame, a third thing. The clock of two, the watchmaker said. It does not run unless two hands rest upon it. If one tries alone, it sleeps. The traveler reached tentatively toward one plate. The watchmaker nodded to the other. When both placed their palms, the blue deepened. A soft hum rose, the plates warmed, then a slender hand beneath the table swung forward, marking not seconds, but something slower, heavier, shared minutes. What does it count? The traveler asked. Mutual attention, the watchmaker replied. Hours that move only when two hearts lean. Lovers know this clock. So do old friends. So do enemies who finally listen. Within the blue, images rose, two figures at a kitchen table, faces lined with life, arguing until both realized the point was not victory, but understanding. A child reading aloud to an elder whose eyes had grown reluctant. A stranger in a station offering water to another whose suitcase had broken. The hand ticked. Not fast. Enough. The traveler felt tears gather again, less like storm and more like tide. I thought I was carried by my efforts, he said. But these togetherness hours, they shaped me as riverbanks shape a river. You are not only your own current, the watchmaker said. You are also the shape offered by others. Without their edges, your water would be flood. When they lifted their hands, the clock of two settled back into its blue sleep. The traveler wanted to touch it again and again, but hunger disguised as devotion is still hunger. He followed on. They came to a balcony that overlooked a lower hall. Here, no shelves or bowls, only a long table covered in small stones, each the size of a minute. Some were dull, some luminous, some nearly transparent. A placard, no letters, only a symbol shaped like a hand open and another hand open across from it, rested at the table's end. They exchanged, the watchmaker said. Not the ledger you feared, something kinder. Here, when one realizes the hours they have received, they may choose a minute to return, not to the giver, that is often impossible, but to the river. The traveler stepped down. He picked up a dull stone. It was heavy as a withheld apology. He set it on his palm and whispered, "For the time I took and did not see." The stone warmed, not much, then a little more. Light entered it, as dew enters cloth. He placed it back among the others. It did not blaze. It glowed like a coal finally offered air. He took a transparent stone next and closed it in his fist. "For the silence someone kept for me," he said, lifting his eyes to the bowls he could no longer see from here. "I will keep a silence for another." The stone brightened and seemed to lose weight. When he set it down, it slid on the table of its own accord toward an unseen channel and disappeared without leaving the smallest scratch. "Where do they go?" he asked. "To places that need them," the watchmaker said. "Minutes are more intelligent than men. They find their work." They climbed again. The hall opened into a ridge of windows through which the light of no particular sun entered. The traveler pressed his forehead to the cool glass. Far below, more rivers braided, more lanterns slept or kept their embers. More domes recorded the invisible economy in which all were rich and none were solvent. "Tell me a parable," the traveler said softly without turning. "I have seen much. I want to hold it in a shape I can carry." The watchmaker obliged, not with sermon, but with stories short enough to leave room for breath. A woman had 2 hours. One she spent on work and was praised. The other she spent watching beside someone who would not remember it. The first hour built a tower. The second kept a roof from falling. Which was greater? He let the question stand until it ceased being a question. "The city remembers both," he said. "But roofs, are the reason towers are bearable." The traveler smiled with the corner of his mouth. The rest of his face was praying. They walked along the windows until they came to a door cut in shadow. No handle, only a faint etching of a breath on the wood, as if the door itself exhaled. "The quiet room," the watchmaker said. "You will enter alone." "What is kept there?" the traveler asked. "The hours you were given that you thought were yours," he said. "The air you breathed while others held their breath, so you could speak. The room will not show faces. It will return you to the weight of borrowed oxygen. Do not apologize in there. Thank, then vow." The traveler's hand sought the spring in his pocket. It answered with steady warmth, not urging, not warning. He pressed the spring to the door as he had at the workshop's threshold. The wood remembered the tree again and gave way a fingerwidth. Before he stepped in, he turned to the watchmaker. "What should I bring out?" "A small hour," the watchmaker said. "Chosen, untouched by hurry." "Untouched by hurry," the traveler repeated, as if the phrase were a coin he must not drop. He entered. The door closed like a held breath released. Inside, there were no shelves, no bowls, no lanterns. Only a bench and a quiet that filled it without crowding. He sat. Time did not stop. It settled. He felt not visions, not scenes, but weights lifting, one, then another. The afternoon someone answered his anger with patience, though theirs was thinner. The evening someone cooked when his hands would not. The morning someone changed their route to walk with him. He had not asked. He had not thanked. The room did not accuse. It returned each hour to his chest the way a friend returns a book you forgot you lent, only to remember it was a gift. He wept as if the body had finally found the right key for a locked door. When his hands were empty of apology, gratitude found them and filled them. He spoke it aloud, not as penance but as truth. "I own no one. I belong to many." When he rose, the bench held the shape of his sitting for a breath and then forgot him kindly. On a small table by the door lay a single minute, sleeping like a bird with its head under its wing. He cupped it gently. It woke, unstartled and brightened. He did not know who would need it. That was not required. He stepped out. The watchmaker regarded the light in his hands the way a gardener regards a cutting that has taken root in water. "Untouched by hurry?" he asked. "Untouched," the traveler said. "Then you are ready for the last lesson of this hall," the watchmaker replied. He turned toward a stair that descended where no stair had been, into the murmuring beneath the workshop, where the great current sounded like a choir one room away. "Come, you have seen the gifts you received. Now you will see how they move when you give them." The traveler followed, carrying the small hour not as a possession, but as a lit candle in a windless night. The stairs spiraled downward, worn stone lit not by lamps but by the glow rising from beneath. The traveler descended carefully, one hand cupping the small hour he had been entrusted with, the other brushing the wall as if the wall itself might need assurance. The sound grew clearer, not rushing water, not wind, not song, but a blending of all three, a low murmuring choir. The air carried the scent of iron and rain, softened by something floral, like fields breathing through stone. At the stair's end, a vast chamber opened. The ceiling arched so high it vanished in a shadow, yet the floor pulsed with light. Rivers of seconds crossed and braided, converging into a central pool of radiance. Sparks leapt upward, danced, fell back, not randomly, but as if answering an unseen rhythm. Figures moved along the banks, not workers, but witnesses. Some knelt, heads bowed. Some stood, arms open. All were silent, letting the murmuring speak. The watchmaker led the traveler to the edge. He gestured to the pool. "This is where the hours you receive return when given again. Not back to their source, not to be erased, to be multiplied." The traveler knelt. The small hour in his hand glowed steadily. A bird awake now, feathers bright, eyes calm. He felt its weight not as burden, but as trust. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Place it here," said the watchmaker. "But do not drop it. Do not discard it. Offer it. The pool does not accept what is thrown. It accepts only what is given." The traveler bent low, lowering his hand until the hour touched the surface. It did not sink. It floated, a small star on water. Then the murmuring deepened. Sparks from the surrounding rivers surged inward, drawn to it. The hour expanded, its glow widening in rings that pulsed outward through the currents. The whole chamber brightened, the choir swelling. The traveler gasped. "It is not mine anymore." The watchmaker's voice was soft, reverent. "It never was. That is the secret of every hour. You only hold it until it finds its way." The traveler pressed his hands together, not in habit, but in surrender. Gratitude filled him, sharp and sweet. He had feared debt, feared theft, feared lateness. Here, none of those had weight. Only gift. He whispered to the pool. "Then let this hour nourish where I cannot. Let it reach what my feet will never touch." The pool pulsed in assent. From its depths, a strand of light rose, curved like a thread caught by invisible hands, and vanished into the upper dark. Somewhere, unseen, someone's emptiness had been met. The traveler bowed low, forehead near the stone. Tears fell and vanished into sparks. When he lifted his head, the watchmaker was watching, eyes not proud, not pitying, only steady. "You have learned," he said, "that time is not hoarded, it is circulated. You do not own a single hour. You borrow, you receive, you give." The traveler's voice trembled. "Then I vow, every hour I hold, I will release. I will not clutch." The spring in his pocket pulsed warmly, agreeing. The watchmaker placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Then you are ready to see the forge." "The forge?" the traveler asked, still kneeling. The watchmaker nodded. "Yes. Gratitude is the beginning. Forgiveness is the fire. There are hours in you rusted with regret. They too must be redeemed." The traveler's chest tightened, as though he had been expecting this summons all along. He bowed his head once more to the pool, then rose. The chamber around them seemed brighter, not because the light had changed, but because he had. They climbed a short stair on the far side. At its top, an archway opened into shadow. The air beyond glowed faintly red, like embers banked but waiting. Before stepping through, the traveler looked back once at the pool. Hours still drifted across its surface, offered by countless unseen hands. He realized the truth. He was not alone in his vow. Every second was carried by the giving of another. He pressed his hand to his chest. I belong to many. The watchmaker inclined his head, then led him forward. The archway breathed ember light, a low red that did not threaten but warned. Be honest here. The traveler crossed with the care of someone entering a room where sleeping hearts are being mended. Heat met him, not the violence of flame, but the steadiness of work. The air smelled of iron, oil, and something green that should not have grown underground and had grown anyway. The chamber opened like a kiln turned into a cloister. Rows of forges stood in semicircles, each with a bed of coals breathing a slow animal glow. Above them, hoods and flues coiled upward into shadow, carrying away what confession would release. Between the forges, benches bore trays of small metal pieces, slivers, screws, rings, notched wheels no larger than a thumbnail, fine pins bent like questions. Some shone bright as dew on a blade. Others had the dull crust of neglect, reddish-brown, flaking, the color of hours that had sat too long in weather they were never meant to endure. The watchmaker did not put on drama. He tied back his sleeves with twine, lifted a pair of tongs whose handles were worn smooth by faithful use, and nodded toward a tray whose contents were almost entirely rust. These, he said, are minutes that forgot their purpose. Omission is the weather of rust. Distraction is its rain. The traveler stepped closer. When he extended a finger above the tray, he felt not heat, but shame rising like a weak steam. He recognized shapes he could not have named a year ago and could not ignore now. The minute when he turned away from a face that had asked for him without words. The minute he promised to ploy and build a small ruin with a delay. The minute he scrolled his hunger in a numbness while friend waited 2 streets away for a call that did not come. Will they break? He asked, his voice catching. If you deny them, the watchmaker said, selecting a thin ring with tongs gentle as a surgeon's hand. Rust presents being lied about, but named truthfully, it becomes soft. Softness is the first miracle. He laid the ring on a black stone and with a file breathed away loose scale. No hurry. The ring flinched once, as if surprised to be handled without contempt, and then went still, receiving the touch as one receives the first kind word after a long winter. The watchmaker lifted it and lowered it into the mouth of a forge. Coals accepted it with a sound like rain meeting a roof. Heat does what scorn cannot, he said. It returns what was rigid to what can be shaped. The traveler watched as dull became cherry, then orange, then the color of a small sun held in tongs. He felt the spring in his pocket pulse, answering the sight with warmth of its own. He understood, not as theory, but as body, why confession spoken in cold rooms turned brittle. Fire was the mercy that made admitting bearable. What do we do now? He asked. We temper, the watchmaker said, but not with punishment, with purpose. He drew the ring from the fire and did not strike it. He curved it, barely, with a small wooden mallet that made sounds like a heartbeat politely knocking. When the ring held a true circle again, he quenched it, neither in oil nor water, but in a trough of clear liquid that smelled faintly of rain on hot stone. The surface trembled, the ring went dark, then bright, then a quiet gray shot through with strength. What is that? The traveler asked, touching the rim of the trough. The water of consent, the watchmaker said. Truth accepted, not argued. Iron cools stronger in what it agrees to. He set the ring aside. It did not glitter as a jewel would. It looked like work that would last. They moved to another tray. This one held pieces that were not entirely rust, but splotched, the freckles of divided attention. Hesitations litter, the watchmaker murmured, picking up a thin wheel whose teeth were half orange, half clean. You began well and looked away. The wheel learned you're looking. The traveler winced. He knew that minute. A message half-typed and abandoned. A prayer started and answered by notification. A kindness begun and then edited until only politeness remained. He reached for the wheel and stopped, fearing it would crumble under his hand. "Try," the watchmaker said, "but name it first." He swallowed. "I wanted to be useful and liked," he said. "So I broke my hour in two and gave neither half." The wheel did not shatter. It warmed, slightly, as if the naming had moved the forge closer. He lifted it with tongs that felt more like a promise than a tool and lowered it into the coals. The glow this time rose quicker, as if hesitation is eager to be resolved once admitted. When he drew it out, the watchmaker nodded toward a small die, a simple press shaped like a mouth that has learned to say enough. The traveler set the wheel and pressed. The teeth aligned. He quenched it in consent. When he lifted it, the teeth met one another with a sound like soft applause. "You will use it later," the watchmaker said. "Teeth speak to teeth. It will correct other hesitations." The traveler looked down the aisles. Many forges breathed. Many trays waited. At the far wall, a row of larger furnaces glowed a deeper red, doors shut like eyelids keeping difficult dreams. He felt a presence gathering there. Not a person, not yet, but a pressure, as when weather changes and bone knows before sky. "What is behind those?" he asked. The watchmaker wiped his hands on a cloth that had been stained by years of reddened honesty. "Clinkers," he said. "Hours not merely spotted but clotted. Things you repeated until rust learned your name." The traveler's throat tightened. He remembered not single delays, but patterns. The season he did not speak truth because peace at dinner was easier. The winter he let a bitterness teach him how to pronounce love. The years he performed busyness so no one would ask him to be real. The heat at the back of the room leaned toward him like a question. "Not yet," the watchmaker said, seeing his breath shorten. "Small pieces first." A forge respects sequence. They worked. He learned to hold the tongs as if shaking hands with the minute he had refused. He learned the color of ready. There is one, before metal becomes belligerent. He learned the difference between striking to punish and striking to shape. He learned how to listen with his wrist for the way softened steel tells you, enough. The trough of consent murmured each time with a note he could almost sing. Not all pieces endured the naming. One pin, when admitted, I ignored a voice that told the truth because it sounded tired, crumbled into powder as soon as it felt heat. The traveler flinched. It had no core, the watchmaker said, brushing the ash into a small clay jar with a label not written but felt. Humiliation returned to earth. Some minutes were born of pretense. Let them go to soil. Give their place to something honest. When he grew steadier, the watchmaker set a different task. He rolled out a shallow drawer beneath the bench. Inside lay fragments that were not his. The metal knew, and so did he. Each piece was tagged with a ribbon of thread, the color of someone else's hour. These are minutes you rusted in another's keeping, the watchmaker said. Apologies are not repairs. They're doors. Repairs are acts. The traveler's hands shook. A thin bar lay there with a notch like a bite taken out of it. He did not recognize the shape. He recognized the absence it had made. He whispered the name he should have said years ago and added the sentence he had never spoken aloud. I did not come. It cost you. The bar warmed. He did not place it in the forge. He set aside. You cannot temper what is not in your hands, the watchmaker said softly. But you can vow a minute to meet the absence you made. Do that, and the city will carry the bar to where it fits. He placed one of the good rings beside it as pledge. Through it all, the presence at the back wall gathered itself. It had the magnetism of a heap of tools abandoned in a rainstorm, something that still shone under crust. It smelled like iron that has remembered blood. The traveler tried to occupy himself with smaller trays, but the heat of the larger furnaces made a compass of his skin. He faced the watchmaker. "It's here," he said, "the thing that told me too late in the hall above." The watchmaker did not deny. "Yes, you met its voice where clocks spin. Here you will meet its body." He gestured toward the line of shut furnace doors. "Not to kill it, to retemper its name." "What is its name?" the traveler asked, though he knew. The watchmaker's eyes, which had learned to be kind without learning to lie, answered, "Tempo perdido." The words crossed the room like a slow bell. The nearest furnace door flexed almost imperceptibly inward, as if something behind it breathed in, surprised to hear itself called. The watchmaker set down his tongs. He lifted no weapon. He took instead a leather apron and tied it around the traveler's waist. The leather had been darkened not by soot, but by hands. He placed a small hammer in the traveler's palm, the kind that could coax, not crush. "When you open that door," he said, "it will say what it always says. You wasted me. Therefore you are waste." You will be tempted to argue or agree. Do neither. Name, place, heat, shape, consent. It will learn your method, or it will keep you afraid forever. The spring in the traveler's pocket warmed as if to step closer to his skin. He thought of the river that had multiplied hours when two simply listened. He thought of the lanterns that kept vigil for no one in particular and for everyone. He thought of the minute he had released into the pool, not thrown but offered. He breathed. "Am I forgiven?" he asked, not as doctrine, but as a child asks if the door will open to his knock. "You are being forged," the watchmaker said. "Forgiveness is the strength that lets a shape hold." The traveler nodded. He walked toward the back wall. As he passed the smaller forges, the pieces he had tempered rang almost inaudibly, thin, bright notes, like tools applauding. He stood before the central furnace. Its door was a simple plate with a simple handle, polished by palms that had trembled and found steadiness by use. He placed his hand on the handle. It was hot, but not enough to harm. The heat said, "Be awake." He lifted and the door yielded, not in drama, but in duty, and the breath from within met his face. The scent of iron and memory in the last seconds of a day one wishes to change. Something moved in the glow. Not a person, a confluence. Wheels fused to rings to pins to bars. Clots of time that had grown into a shape by being ignored. It did not look like a monster. It looked like a task he had promised and postponed until it learned to stand up. Its first word was not a word. It was the old sensation he knew too well, heaviness wrapped in accusation. "Too late," it said without sound. Too late. He did not argue. He did not agree. He named the first piece he recognized, a thin strip whose bend he remembered from a winter of rehearsed indifference, and caught it with the tongs. "I left you waiting," he said. The strip did not fight. He lowered it into the coals. The heap behind it shifted, curious. At his side, though he had not heard him approach, the watchmaker stood with the trough. No label. He knew its name now, without letters. "Eat," the watchmaker said quietly. The traveler watched the strip learn color. He lifted it ready and did not punish. He tapped until it remembered straightness. He quenched it in consent. It sang. He set it aside. The heat breathed, not softer, not harder. Listening, he reached again. The heap stirred within the furnace, a mass of bent wheels, pitted gears, rings with jagged edges. an anatomy of omission given body. Its movements are not quick, but heavy, like a pile of chains shifting under its own weight. When it spoke again, the words had rhythm, hammered by years of repetition. You wasted me. Therefore you are waste. The traveler's shoulders stiffened. Shame tried to answer before he could. He gripped the hammer with both hands and whispered, almost to himself, name, place, heat, shape, consent. He repeated the sequence like a litany to silence the other litany. The watchmaker stood a pace behind, steady as stone, offering no shield. This was not his fire to temper. The traveler bent forward with the tongs and reached into the glow. He grasped a crooked gear fused to 3 others. Its edges screamed with rust as he pulled. The heap shifted, groaned, but did not resist, like something long waiting to be claimed. He laid it on the anvil. The rust spat flecks, bitter as old arguments. He named it, the season I called busyness devotion, while truth sat outside the door. The gear shuddered. He lifted it to the forge. Flame licked it without malice. It glowed, first sullen red, then the color of dawn not yet willing to rise. He hammered lightly, not punishing, coaxing. The gear's teeth straightened. He quenched it. Consent's water hissed, then sighed. When he lifted it, the gear turned freely, no longer fused. The heap inside the furnace rumbled, voice deeper. You cannot temper all of me. I am legion. I am years. The traveler's breath faltered, then steadied. Then I will temper year by year, piece by piece. He reached again. This time, what he pulled was not metal alone. It was a bar, half melted, with impressions of many hands pressed into it. People he had failed when distraction ruled him. His chest clenched. He wanted to throw it back into the heap, pretend it was not his. The watchmaker's silence forbade the lie. He placed it on the anvil. His hammer trembled. He whispered, for the times I looked but did not see, for the ears that heard me, wandering while they pleaded for my presence. The bar cracked. A line spread like lightning. He panicked. It's breaking. Keep naming, said the watchmaker. He bent low, sweat dripping, voice raw. For the night, I left her waiting. For the day, I hid behind laughter. For the morning, I turned the page without reading the ache in the margin. With each confession, the crack deepened until the bar split, but did not collapse. It divided cleanly into 2 thinner bars, each sounder than the original. The watchmaker spoke at last. Some hours cannot be restored to one shape. They become 2 smaller truths. Accept them as they are. The traveler quenched them. When lifted, they were lighter, usable. He set them aside. His chest loosened with the relief of something named properly. The heap's voice faltered, then returned. You are too small. I am endless. You will never finish me. The traveler's grip on the hammer steadied. Then I will not finish. I will continue. He remembered the signal yard, the truth the watchman had spoken. Each crossing asks only the next honest minute. Forging 2 was like this, one piece, then another, not forever, only now. He reached again. This time he pulled a piece almost unrecognizable, a lump of metal fused to ash. It reeked of bitterness. He gagged at the smell, remembering seasons when he had cultivated resentment like a crop. He named it without flinching. The hours I rehearsed anger to avoid grief. The lump hissed, sparks scattering. He hammered gently, and the ash fell away, leaving a core, pitted, scarred, but strong enough to hold weight. He quenched it. It rang like a bell learning how to sing again. The heap shuddered. From its body fell smaller fragments, clattering onto the forge floor, pieces loosening themselves at the sound of his truth. He realized something. He did not have to drag them all out. Some would come forward when he confessed enough. He worked on, rust to red, red to orange, orange to malleable. Hammer to trough, trough to ring or bar or gear restored. He learned to recognize the moment when metal resisted and when it yielded. He learned that silence between strikes mattered as much as the blows. The furnace chamber grew brighter, not from the fire, but from the pieces tempered and laid aside. They glowed faintly on the benches, a constellation of redeemed hours. Each one whispered to the others, a chorus of small survivals. The heap shrank, but it did not vanish. It gathered itself and rose higher, taking on a shape not entirely human, not entirely machine. A torso of fused gears, arms of bent rods, a head with no face but a clock dial cracked through its center. The hands twitched, pointing always to too late. The traveler's heart pounded. This was no longer fragments. This was his shadow temporal, whole enough to speak with form. Its voice carried weight like anvils dropped in his silence. You wasted me. You wasted me. You wasted me. The traveler staggered. For a moment, shame threatened to undo all tempering. But then he saw the ring he had restored, the wheel whose teeth aligned, the bars split into honest halves. They did not accuse. They shone. He lifted the hammer high and shouted, not in rage, but in declaration, I wasted, yes. But waste is not all I am. He struck the anvil once, not to shape metal, but to send sound. The tempered pieces answered, ringing together. Their harmony filled the chamber, louder than the heap's accusation. The figure reeled. Its cracked dial shivered. If not waste, what are you? The traveler's hand went to the spring in his pocket. It pulsed steady, warm, alive. He drew it forth, held it high. Its glow spread, brighter than forge light. I am Vow, he said, voice breaking but unbroken. Every moment I choose to attend is stronger than those I lost. You're not my death. You are my forge. The shadow figure trembled. The rust flaked from its arms, falling like scales. Its body softened, glowing faintly. It staggered forward, not in rage now, but in confusion, like a child unsure whether to flee or fall. The traveler stepped toward it. He did not raise the hammer. He opened his palm, spring glowing. You are not enemy. You are the hours I left unclaimed. I will not deny you. I will not worship you. I will temper you. The figure shuddered. The cracked dial tilted upward. For the first time, its hands aligned, both at the mark of now. The light from the forge flared, enveloping it. When it cleared, the figure was gone. In its place lay a single gear, large and heavy, its teeth clean, its surface dark but strong. It hummed with a low note, like an organ key pressed gently. The watchmaker stepped forward. He lifted the gear with care, set on the anvil, and bowed his head to it. The heart of regret, he said softly. Hard one, keep it not as weight, but as witness. It will remind you that even waste can be shaped. The traveler touched the gear with trembling fingers. It vibrated, sending steadiness into his arm. Tears ran freely. He whispered, then I vow. I will not fear what I wasted. I will forge it into what I need. The gear on the anvil pulsed faintly, not with fire but with memory. Its hum was steady, low, the sound of something that had carried too much weight and survived. The traveler could not take his eyes from it. He reached out, fingers brushing its rim. It vibrated against his skin, not accusing, not praising, only telling him, I am yours, but I am not you alone. I am us, the hours you turned away, the time you lost, and the will that brought me here again. He bowed his head. Tears fell onto the gear's dark surface and slid away, leaving no stain. It seemed to drink them, as if regret itself had become thirsty for truth. The watchmaker's voice came quiet, reverent. Do you know what you hold? The traveler shook his head. It feels like shame, but different. Heavier, but steadier. The watchmaker nodded. It is the heart of regret tempered. Not the voice that condemns, not the rust that spreads, but the core that waits to be used. Without it, you would think yourself stainless, and stainless souls cannot bear weight. This, he touched the gear lightly with the tip of a finger, is the proof that broken hours can become foundations. The traveler lifted the gear with both hands. It was heavier than it looked, but the weight was honest. He pressed it to his chest, above the spring that still pulsed in his pocket. For a moment, the two rhythms, spring and gear, were out of step. Then, slowly, they aligned, beating together like drum and drum. A warmth spread through his chest. He closed his eyes and saw not scenes but textures. Long corridors of silence he had mistaken for emptiness. Faces that had turned from him when he had turned away first. Seasons he had painted with excuses and left uninhabited. They did not accuse. They did not vanish. They settled into place. Bricks he had once scattered, now forming a wall he could lean on. He whispered, almost afraid of the sound of his own truth. I wasted, yes. But waste has become witness. I am carried by even what I lost. The watchmaker smiled faintly. Then the forge has done its work. Regret is no longer your jailer. It is your teacher. The traveler breathed deep, the first breath that did not stumble against shame. He felt taller, not because his body had grown, but because the hours once denied had joined his stature. The watchmaker gestured toward the benches where tempered pieces lay. Rings, bars, wheels, each singing softly. Gather them, he said, not to hoard, to carry as tools. The traveler moved among them, collecting the shapes he had mended. Each hummed faintly in his palm, like animals still shy but willing. He slipped them into a pouch the watchmaker provided, the leather old but sturdy. The pouch grew heavy, but not unbearably. It was the weight of responsibility chosen. When he returned, the watchmaker gestured toward the great furnace, still glowing though the heap was gone. Step inside. The traveler froze. Inside, the watchmaker's eyes were calm. Yes, the fire that shaped your waist must now shape you. Do not fear. It will not consume. It will clarify. The traveler hesitated. His body remembered burns, though not of flesh, burns of shame, of failure. But he looked again at the gear pressed to his chest and the spring warm in his pocket. Together they told him, you are not here to be destroyed. You're here to be forged. He stepped forward. The heat wrapped him at once, thick and enveloping. His breath caught, but he did not burn. The flames licked his skin like hands that knew him better than he knew himself. They showed him images, not as visions, but as truths. Himself sitting idle while love waited. His lips moving in false agreement while his heart refused. His eyes avoiding pain that had begged to be seen. Each image flared, then melted, dripping into the coals. He sobbed, not from fear, but from relief, as if each flame stripped him of a layer he had never needed. In the center of the furnace stood a pedestal of stone. He laid the gear upon it. The fire surged, wrapping the gear in brilliance. When it dimmed, the gear remained, glowing from within, its hum deeper, resonant. It had become more than tempered metal. It had become part of him. The watchmaker's voice came through the fire, though the watchmaker himself did not enter. Regret, accepted, becomes strength. Strength, shared, becomes compassion. Compassion is the proof that wasted time has not wasted you. The traveler bowed low before the gear. He whispered, then I vow, I will not flee regret. I will carry it as light for others. The gear pulsed once, as if sealing the vow. Then it dissolved, not into ash, not into smoke, but into his chest. He gasped. The weight he had carried in his hands now lived in his heart, humming with each beat. It did not oppress. It steadied. The fire calmed. He stepped out, trembling but whole. His clothes bore no scorch. only the faint scent of iron cooled by rain. His eyes burned with salt, but his vision was clear. The watchmaker regarded him with quiet pride. Now you are alloyed, not pure, stronger. The traveler fell to his knees, overcome. I thought forgiveness was a word, but it is fire. It remakes. The watchmaker placed a hand on his shoulder. Yes, and now you know, forgiveness is not erasure. It is integration. What you wasted is no longer waste. It is foundation. They sat together on the stone floor, silence wrapping them. For a long while, neither spoke. The traveler felt the spring pulse, the gear hum within him, and knew they were aligned. At last, the watchmaker rose and gestured toward a narrow passage opening at the far side of the chamber. Light shimmered there, not red but clear, refracted, as if 1,000 mirrors had bent it into purity. There, he said, is the next lesson. You have tempered what was rusted. Now you must face what is hidden. The forge teaches you to admit. The lens will teach you to reveal. The traveler stood. His body felt lighter, though he carried more than before. He pressed his hand to his chest. The hum of regret was steady, strong. He was not free of his shadow. He was whole with it. He looked back once at the forge. Flames burned low, waiting for the next soul. He whispered, "Thank you." The fire answered with a flicker, as if bowing. He turned toward the passage. The watchmaker walked beside him. Together, they stepped into the glow of refracted light. They emerged from the forge into air that startled him by its clarity. After the heavy scent of iron and smoke, this new space felt like water poured through crystal. The passage narrowed into a stair carved of pale stone, each step polished by no foot, yet gleaming as if walked by light itself. At its crest stretched a span suspended over nothingness, the bridge. It was not stone, nor wood, nor metal. It was woven of radiance, threads of light braided and rebraided until they formed a path strong enough for truth to walk on. Its rails were transparent, glassy, holding within them veins of color that shifted with each breath. Beneath, no river, no land, only a depthless clarity, as though the air itself were a mirror. The traveler paused at the threshold. His chest tightened. The spring pulsed in his pocket, steady but firm, like a hand pressing. Enter. The hum of the tempered gear still resonated in his chest, reminding him that regret had been alloyed into strength. Yet this place did not ask for strength. It asked for nakedness. The watchmaker stopped beside him. His face held neither warning nor comfort, only truth. The bridge does not measure weight. It measures honesty. Walk, and you will be seen. The traveler's throat went dry. Seen by whom? The watchmaker's gaze tilted toward the transparent air. By yourself. By what you have hidden from even your own remembering. The traveler clenched his fists. And if I cannot bear it, the watchmaker answered with the gentleness of steel, then the bridge will bear it for you until you can. But if you deny it, the path will dissolve. He looked forward. The span shimmered faintly, trembling, as though waiting for his consent. He drew a long breath, pressed the spring against his palm, and stepped onto the light. At once the air shifted. The bridge did not creak, did not sway, yet he felt himself laid bare. Around him, small motes rose like dust in sunlight. They thickened, grew brighter, until they shaped themselves into images. The first was simple. He saw himself, younger, standing before a mirror, arranging his hair not to please himself but to impress another. The vanity was small, almost tender. He smiled sadly at the boy. The image shimmered, then dissolved. Next came sharper. He saw a day when he had pretended to listen, but his mind had wandered. The figure of the ones speaking blurred, their voice turned to water. His own face in the vision smiled politely while the other's light dimmed. He winced. The image did not fade until he whispered, "Yes, I did that." I withheld. Only then did it dissolve into the air. More images followed, some trivial, some piercing. His envy at another success. His false laughter to belong. His anger, disguised as silence, that had cut deeper than words. Each floated like a glass bubble, clear yet undeniable. Each waited for acknowledgement, then dissolved. He staggered, gripping the rail. "It is too much," he whispered. The watchmaker's voice carried across the span, steady as always. "Truth does not crush. Only hiding does. Let yourself be carried." The traveler forced another step. The bridge brightened beneath him, threads glowing whiter as if rewarded. But ahead, darker clouds stirred. Images thickened, heavier. He saw a woman's face, kind, waiting, and himself turning away because her patience made him uncomfortable. He saw a child reaching out and himself distracted, eyes on his own pursuits. He saw hours where he could have spoken love and chose silence. He fell to his knees. The images circled, countless, suffocating. Shame rose, louder than the forge, heavier than the heap. "I cannot," he gasped. "I cannot." The watchmaker did not move to him, but his words came like a bell rung far and near. The bridge is not asking perfection. It is asking transparency. You need not justify. You need only say, "This is mine." The traveler pressed his forehead to the glowing surface. Tears burned. He forced breath into his chest and whispered, one by one, "Yes, I turned away. Yes, I withheld. Yes, I feared. Yes, I failed." The images quivered, then astonishingly softened. They did not vanish. They grew translucent, like glass washed by rain, until they joined the rails themselves, woven into the structure of the bridge. He realized with awe, the bridge was not made only of light. It was made of confessed truth. Every step forward strengthened the span with transparency. He rose shakily, tears streaking his face. He whispered, "Then I will not flee. Let all of me be seen." The bridge flared. For a moment it was almost unbearable, an explosion of color and memory. He saw not only failings, but also forgotten kindnesses. The hour he had comforted a stranger without remembering. The coin he had given though it hurt. The night he had stayed awake to keep another from despair. He wept harder, for he had forgotten these as surely as his failures. The watchmaker's voice came gentle now. "Do you see? Truth does not shame. It reveals. You are shadow and light, vanity and generosity, error and vow. Transparency is not punishment. It is freedom." The traveler's knees weakened again, but not from despair, from release. He stepped forward, and the images walked with him, weaving into the span. He no longer feared them. They were his whole, not hidden. Ahead, the far shore glowed brighter, as if waiting for a heart not pure, but whole. The bridge stretched farther than sight, a ribbon of woven brilliance suspended between silence and sky. Each step carried the traveler deeper into his own unveiling. The air thickened, not with smoke, but with truth pressing forward to be seen. Around him, the motes returned, brighter, heavier. They shaped not only small moments, but entire patterns. He saw corridors of years condensed into single visions. His stomach clenched, knees weakening. One image unfolded. Himself standing among friends, laughter on his lips, while inside his chest a cold silence roared. He had worn joy like armor, hiding loneliness that begged to be named. The visions circled him, eyes accusing, lips smiling falsely. He cried out, "I did not want to burden them. I thought it was love to hide." The watchmaker's voice carried from behind, "Say what it was." He lowered his head, throat tight. It was fear. Fear that if I showed my hunger, I would be left. Fear that if I confessed my ache, they would turn away. The vision softened. The false laughter dissolved, leaving behind only the loneliness itself, which looked at him not with accusation, but with relief, finally recognized. It stepped into the rail, becoming part of the bridge. Another image emerged, darker. He saw himself in a room, turning away from a weeping face. His chest collapsed. He shouted, "I cannot help her. I had nothing to give." The watchmaker answered, "Name it truly." Tears streamed down his face. I turned away because her pain frightened me, because I wanted comfort, not cost. I abandoned her. The weeping face did not vanish. It lifted, eyes shining, not with blame, but with acknowledgement. It too joined a rail, clear as crystal. The traveler stumbled forward, clutching his chest. The spring pulsed, steadying him. The tempered gear hummed within. Together they whispered, "Do not flee. Be seen." The air thickened again. More visions arose, not single moments, but contradictions. He saw himself giving with one hand while resenting with the other. He saw himself speaking truth, but twisting it subtly to win admiration. He saw tenderness laced with pride, humility poisoned with vanity. He screamed, "I am double. I am false." The watchmaker's tone was like a bell struck clean. "No, you are whole. What is split can be named, and what is named can be carried." The traveler dropped to his knees. "But how can I walk if I am contradiction itself?" The watchmaker answered softly, "By letting the bridge carry you." Transparency does not demand consistency, only honesty. At that, the visions pressed closer, a crowd of selves, kind and cruel, generous and selfish, tender and cold. They circled him like a jury, but their eyes were steady, not condemning. Each waited for acknowledgement. He whispered, trembling, "You are me. You all are me." The crowd of selves shimmered, then dissolved, their outlines streaming into the bridge, strengthening its glow. The span beneath him flared, steady, woven now not of light alone, but of his own contradictions accepted. Still, the hardest vision waited. At the center of the bridge, suspended in air, rose a scale. Its plates were glass, balanced but trembling. Upon one appeared every cruelty, every omission, every falsehood. Upon the other, every act of kindness, every listening moment, every silent gift. The scale tilted, wavered, nearly broke. The traveler gasped. His chest heaved. "This is the judgment." The watchmaker's voice was low but firm. "No, this is the mirror. Judgment asks, what are you worth? The mirror asks, will you see yourself?" The traveler's breath shook. He stepped toward the scale. His eyes fixed on the side, weighed with cruelty, with fear, with waste. He expected condemnation, but the plate did not fall endlessly. It balanced, however shakily, against the kindnesses he had forgotten. Both sides trembled, equal in fragility. He whispered, "I am both. I am cruelty and kindness, cowardice and courage." The scale steadied. A light rose between the plates, joining them into one. The traveler fell to his knees, weeping. "I am whole." The bridge blazed white. The motes scattered, then wove into the rails, singing like crystals struck by wind. The scale dissolved, its light flowing into the path. The traveler staggered forward, each step lighter, though nothing had been erased. Everything had been integrated. At last he stopped, chest heaving. He turned back. The watchmaker still stood at the far end, distant but steady, watching. His voice carried like a hand across the air. Truth is not perfection. Truth is presence. Transparency is freedom. Walk now, and you will not fall. The traveler turned forward. The far shore glowed brighter, inviting. He pressed the spring to his palm, felt the gear hum within, and whispered, "Then let me be transparent. I will walk as I am. not as I pretend. The bridge steadied under him, strong enough now to bear all of him. The bridge narrowed. It did not grow thinner like a string stretched to breaking, but closer, its woven threads of light drawing near to one another until the path felt intimate, like a whisper offered in a quiet room. The air cleared beyond clarity, becoming something that was not merely seen, but seeing. Each breath entered him as if invited to stay and look around. He walked, and the rail hummed at the pitch of the tempered gear that lived now in his chest. The spring in his palm pulsed steadily, not urgent, not lax, present. Behind him, very far now, the watchmaker remained a figure of stillness at the first threshold. He would not come farther. Truth is a bridge each soul must walk alone. The moats rose again, but changed. They no longer formed scenes, nor even patterns. They became reflections that bent inward, folding like pages returning to their spine. He understood before knowing he understood. The bridge had shown him his failures and his kindnesses, his contradictions and his balances. Now it would show him motives, the runes behind the rooms. A sheet of brilliance crossed the path. No wall, no gate, a veil so fine that even light seemed to pause to pass through it. He put out his hand. The veil accepted his fingers and then returned, like water consenting to shape and then remembering it is water. He drew a breath that did not lie. I will go through. As he stepped, the veil gathered itself into a face. Not a face of flesh. The light arranging itself into features he recognized instantly and despised to recognize. His good face. The mask he had learned to wear so well he had mistaken it for skin. Its eyes were clear, kind. Its mouth patient. Its brow sober. It looked exactly like the self he had offered the world when he wanted the world to think him true. He staggered back. Shame darted like a knife. I am not false, he said to the bridge, to himself, to the mask. The mask did not accuse. It simply remained, and because it remained, it asked. He tried again, softer. I did not mean to be false. A bell, far, faint, answered like a single drop into an enormous well. The bridge did not deny his sentence. It asked for another, truer. He let his shoulders fall. He was tired. Tired of holding, tired of arranging. The spring warmed in his palm with a softness that felt like permission. He spoke the sentence he had avoided all his life because it was a key that opened too many doors. I wanted to be seen as good more than I wanted to love. The mask's kind eyes brightened with something that was not triumph. It was relief. It loosened at the edges, the way a bandage loosens when skin has finally knit. The mouth softened. A seam appeared across the brow where pride had sewn itself to humility with invisible thread. He dared more. I used truth to be admired. I offered presents with one hand while the other counted what it might purchase. I have been generous to win sanctuary, honest to win applause. The words shook him. He expected the bridge to recoil. Instead, the rails brightened, as if light itself had been waiting for these exact syllables to add their filament to the weave. The mask leaned close, and for a terrible instant he thought it would affix itself to his face, brand him permanent. But it lifted slowly, gently, and he saw that it had never been glued. He had simply held hard. He opened his fingers the width of a breath. It slid from his hands like a leaf remembering gravity. He did not throw it. He offered it. It lay upon the bridge, and the bridge, which does not keep trophies, drank it as stone drinks rain. Not gone, transformed. He could feel it enter the weave. Not deceit now, but confession made structure, truth made traversable. He wept without the drama of collapse, the way roofs weep after long snow. Water found its path and eased the weight. The span ahead narrowed once more. In its center, a single feather hovered, Not white, not any color the eye could keep. Light itself given the humility of a small form. It hung over a plate of glass, so thin it seemed to tremble with the idea of being. His heart thudded. The old story rose in him, not as dogma, but as memory carried by civilizations. A heart must be weighed. He did not believe in punishments. He did not disbelieve. He believed in accuracy. The feather did not motion him nearer. Accuracy rarely does. He stepped of his own will and felt the hum within his chest. A gear turning, the spring consenting, the whole of him ticking not as machine, but as promise. Beneath the feather, another plate formed, its twin. Not scales of guilt and merit, not that old ledger redressed. Two mirrors facing, with air between them like breath between two friends who will not pretend. The bridge gave no instructions. It only did what bridges do. Held. He placed his right hand on the left plate, then, feeling the error, corrected himself. He did not place his hand. He placed his heart, not by tearing flesh, but by letting his chest be the plate, by standing so the hum in him would be the measure. He stilled. At once the other plate lowered a hair, then lifted, then steadied. The feather did not change, as if feathers know their work and need no theatrics. What moved was him. The hum in his chest learned a new rhythm. Lighter, lighter, not by subtraction, but by relinquishment. I sat down, he whispered, because the bridge would not do his work for him, the wish to be pure. I set down the sentence that must be said about me in every room. I set down the hunger to be the center. I'm not the center. I am a citizen. The plates steadied to one another. The feather hung, indifferent and affectionate. He waited for a voice to declare him worthy. None came. Gratitude came instead, the kind that does not flare but abides. His chest felt unarmored, not exposed, honest. He looked back, not to cling, not to boast, but to bless. Along the span behind him, figures stood, the selves the bridge had shown him, laughing while lonely, generous and proud, cruel and terrified. They did not crowd. They did not beg. They waited to see if he would despise them. He raised his hand, not to dismiss, not to absolve. He was not their judge, to acknowledge. You got me here, he told them. You were clumsy and frightened, and sometimes you were beautiful. I will not exile you. Walk with me as memory, not as mask. They bowed, one by one, then all at once, and stepped sideways into the rails, which accepted them. The bridge brightened, as if history itself, welcomed, had found its occupation. Ahead, a thin wind rose, not cold, not warm. Ere remembering it can move. The span entered its strictest point. Two rails and a single thread of light between, pulled taut over a depth that was not distance, but depth. He understood. The last hiding place is the virtue you admire most. He did not hurry. He did not stall. He named it. I am proud of my attention, he said. I have taken shelter in being the one who listens. I have offered silence as power. I have dressed control as care. The thread trembled, not with threat, with agreement. He felt the old impulse to prove his sentence with story, to curate his confession as exhibit. He refused himself this luxury. Self-exhibition is still disguise. Let me be simple, he said, and the four words entered him like bread. Let me be simple. The thread steadied. He took a step. The world did not blur. It sharpened. He could see the weave of light beneath his foot the way you can see linen's warp when you finally lift it to the window. His balance was not a trick of muscles. It was the mercy of having set down what tried to topple him. 2 steps. The hum in his chest and the pulse in the spring had become a single rhythm. No longer a duet, but one instrument well-tuned. Halfway across the strict, a shape appeared on the thread ahead, small, bright, familiar. The pouch he had filled with tempered pieces, the rings, bars, and wheels reclaimed from the heap. He froze. He had been carrying it on his shoulder. Its strap now lay across the thread, barring him. He understood at once the test. Will you use your work as credential? Will you make of redemption a resume? He loosened the strap from his shoulder and held the pouch up where Air could see. You are not proof, he told it. You are tools, and tools do not walk in front. They walk beside. He bowed to the pouch, a silly, sacred gesture, and set it gently to the right handrail. The rail, blessed rails, held. The pouch did not fall. It did not follow. It waited. He did not feel bereft. He felt correctly accompanied. 3 more careful steps. The strict widened a shade, the way a road opens to allow a passing cart. In that shade, something like laughter moved, quiet, low, not mocking. He recognized it with surprise. It was joy, not the bright flare that burns cool and fast, but the grounded joy that arrives when nothing has been hidden and nothing needs to be. The far shore came into view not as land, not as gate, but as air wearing the idea of an arch. No inscription, no sentry. Distance ceased to measure. Presence measured instead. He stopped one breath from the end. The bridge hummed. The rails and the thread and the feather and the mask that had been and the cells who were and the pouch waiting. Everything that had joined the span held the silence like a shared bowl. Behind him, very far now, the watchmaker lifted a hand. The gesture was not farewell. He placed his palm over his chest. The hum that was steady as ground. He did not ask for verdict. He did not ask for blessing. He offered consent. Let me cross without hiding, he whispered, not to the bridge, not to the air, but to the instinct in him that still loved curtains. Let me cross without hiding. The arch of air brightened the smallest amount possible to be seen without ceasing to be air. He lifted his foot, and the line between this side and the other remembered it was, after all, only a line. The final step was not heavy. It was not light. It was simple. When his foot touched the far side, the bridge did not vanish behind him as he half expected. It remained, glowing steady, as though built not only for him, but for all who would follow. He turned once, and what he saw stunned him. The span woven of radiance was brighter than when he began, because it now held the truths he had spoken, the confessions he had offered, the selves he had embraced. The bridge was his story crystallized into structure, and it would remain. The air at the far shore received him like a garment woven from clarity. No weight pressed, no veil demanded. He could breathe fully, as if his lungs had never before been trusted with this much honesty. The watchmaker approached across the bridge, not by walking, but by simply being where he was needed. His coat shimmered faintly in the new light, sleeves brushed with dust that no longer looked like filings but like stars. He regarded the traveler with the softness of recognition. You crossed, he said. The traveler lowered his head. I do not know if I could. You did not. The watchmaker replied gently. Transparency did. You gave it permission. That is the work. The traveler pressed a hand to his chest. The hum of the tempered gear and the pulse of the spring were one rhythm now, steady and unhidden. I feel lighter, but not because I lost, because I stopped pretending. The watchmaker nodded. That is freedom, not the absence of fault, but the absence of disguise, the lightness of no curtains. They walked together a few steps into the expanse beyond the bridge. The ground was not stone, nor grass, nor cloud. It was clear surface, reflecting sky and self at once. With every step, the traveler saw his reflection not as distortion, but as truth, flawed, yes, but whole. He whispered, half in awe, half in trembling gratitude. So this is the heart of the city. The watchmaker's gaze stretched outward. Closer. The city opens when you no longer guard against your own windows. They stopped at a wide platform where the radiance gathered in a great lens, suspended, crystalline, turning slowly without being touched. Its facets caught every glimmer, breaking light into infinite patterns, scattering them across the horizon. Wherever the traveler turned, he saw reflections of himself, some raw, some tender, some broken, some luminous. None exaggerated, all transparent. He approached the lens, hesitant. Will it judge me again? The watchmaker shook his head. It does not judge. It reveals. What you have not yet spoken will speak itself. But you are ready now because you know revelation is not a prison. It is a key. The traveler gazed into one facet. He saw himself kneeling at the forge, hammer in hand, whispering truths into heated metal. Another facet showed him by the river of listening, weeping as he realized hours are shared. Another showed him at the station, bewildered by clocks. And another, the most difficult, showed him still turning away from pain. That one ached to see, yet he did not look away. He touched the glass. The image did not accuse. It simply met his eyes, asking nothing, demanding nothing. He whispered, "Yes, that is me too." The lens brightened, scattering his voice into 1,000 beams. His words filled the air, not as echo, but as structure. He realized the city was being built brick by brick, vow by vow. Through such moments, transparency was not the end of the path. It was its mortar. The watchmaker stood beside him, voice low. "Do you see now? The truth frees not by perfection, but by visibility. What is seen without denial ceases to rule in shadow. You're not judged by the bridge. You're carried by it." The traveler's chest swelled. He bowed, not to the watchmaker, not to the lens, but to the air itself. "Then let me live transparent. Let me walk unhidden." The lens turned once more. Light scattered outward, flowing across unseen avenues. For a moment, the traveler thought he heard voices, distant souls also crossing their bridges, also laying down their masks. He realized this was not only his story. It was the work of every citizen of time. The watchmaker laid a hand on his shoulder. "You have faced regret in the forge, and you have faced disguise on the bridge. Ahead waits the heart of the city, where what you carry will become architecture. But remember, the work is never only ahead. Every step, even now, is vow." The traveler closed his eyes. He pressed the spring in his palm, felt the gear hum within, and whispered, "Every moment is a vow." The lens flared, scattering the vow like starlight across the horizon. The bridge behind them shone brighter, steady, alive. The path forward beckoned, wide and radiant. The traveler breathed deep. He was not perfect. He was not pure. He was transparent, and transparency was enough. He did not step into the city so much as he felt the city step into him. The light on the far shore did not separate into streets and walls at first. It gathered, as mist gathers around a shape before the shape admits its name. Then, slowly, avenues disclosed themselves like veins, towers like steady breaths, plazas like pauses between sentences. The ground beneath his feet brightened along his intention, as if it were less pavement than attention itself laid end to end. He looked for edges and found none. He sought a gate and discovered the threshold had been his chest all along. "Where are we?" he asked, though the question had already been answered. His voice carried into the clear, and the clear carried it back without echo, as if refusal to distort with a city's first courtesy. The watchmaker's presence was beside him without arriving. "At the heart," he said, "not of a place, but of a way. Your way, our way." A narrow street opened, and they walked. On either side, facades rose, stone, glass, timber, none ornate, none bare. Each held the signature of a hand he recognized and had not noticed he recognized. His. "Here," a lintel shaped like the curve he makes when he is gentle. They are a corner with a small, stubborn angle, the exact angle of his resistance when he refuses what is good for reasons that sound good. He reached out and touched a wall. It was warm. The stone answered like muscle under skin. He drew back, startled. "It breathes," he whispered. "All true architecture does," said the watchmaker. "The city does not stand by weight alone. It stands by vows." As they moved, the traveler saw inscriptions where he expected addresses. No names, only sentences, modest as modesty and exact as craft. I stayed. I told the truth and lost nothing that mattered. I listened without preparing my reply. I forgave and did not starve. Each sentence sat in the stone without boast, the way a beam sits inside a ceiling. Necessary, almost invisible, holding. A tower turned their corner and faced them, not imposing, simply present. Its surface was dark and dense. Metal worked into a spiral that climbed and climbed. He knew it before he knew it. The forge's hum had risen here and never left. The tempered gear within his chest thrummed in recognition. Above the entry, no inscription, only a single ring set into the lintel. One of the rings he had reshaped below. He lifted his hand to it and felt a steadiness, the comfort of weight that will not lie. Every step he had taken through heat had become structure, and the structure did not forget him. They crossed a small bridge, stone this time, not light, arched over a channel running clear. He leaned over, breath held. Within, sparks drifted and then gathered into stream, quickening when he bent without greed, dimming when he tried to grasp. Rivers again, the seconds that multiply when listening is offered and received. He knelt on the bridge and closed his eyes, attending to nothing but the water's willingness to be seen. The current flared, and far away a bell answered. No tower struck it. The bell was simply what rivers do when honored. "Do all streets sit above a river?" he asked. "Enough of them," the watchmaker replied. "When you walk distracted, you feel stones. When you walk present, you hear water under everything." They entered a square. A tree stood at its center, leaves glossy with a light that was not dew. Its trunk bore grafts, so clean they looked grown from seed. Shadow turned into branch, regret into fruit. Small lanterns, kin to the vigils he had seen, hung from low boughs, each a simple flame that said, "I stayed awake when staying awake was the work." Beneath the tree, a bench waited, carved with a sentence so plain it could be missed. "Attention is the unspent coin." The traveler sat. Across from him, a window opened without hands. Inside, a room unfolded, table, basin, 2 chairs, daylight at an honest angle. He knew the room's proportions before he counted them. It was the shape of his better hours, when he had set bread down without keeping score, when he had chosen to wash instead of argue, when he had left a corner clean for someone else to arrive and breathe. The room did not show faces. It showed space made by love. He felt a tenderness that did not belong to pride and did not need to. The watchmaker did not break his quiet. The city does not hurry gratitude. When he rose, the street ahead widened and lifted into a gentle slope. At its crest, a bell tower of glass and brass. No clock on its faces, held within 2 plates that nearly touched. He recognized their call, the clock of 2. He and the watchmaker placed their palms on the base, not to make it work, but to honor how it had worked before and would work again. The blue hum he knew from below deepened, then softened. In its facets, he saw strangers across years sharing minutes that had nothing to sell and everything to give. They moved on. An arcade offered cool shade. Under its arches, niches held shallow bowls. The bowls of restraint, filled with silence that had prevented harm. He felt their cool enter his skin like water on a hot day. If he leaned close, he could almost hear the not said words the bowls had turned into shelter. He whispered thanks to an absence that had been generous. "Is it only mine?" he asked suddenly, frightened by the magnitude of it. "This city, are these all my minutes, my vows, my failures made steady?" The watchmaker's eyes carried a mirth that did not belittle. "Did you ford alone? Did you cross alone? Did you live only on your own hours?" He gestured wide. "You are not a nation. You are a citizen. Your streets meet other streets. Your towers brace against others. Your rivers join." As if to answer, voices rose, not loud, not many, somewhere beyond the next block. They were not speaking to him. They were speaking truthfully nearby. The air through which their words moved knew the way to him. A woman's patience as she listened. A child's concentration as he learned. A neighbor's restraint when rumor asked to be sung. Each sound drifted through his city and left a room stronger. He turned down a narrow lane and found a door he had not known to hope for. It bore no handle, only the memory of many hands laid upon it. He set his palm there and did not push. The wood relented with the affection trees have for rain. Inside, a modest hall opened, shelves with unremarkable objects. A simple mug, a pair of worn shoes, a pencil chewed along its side, a scarf mended twice. He lifted the scarf. Threads crossed the wound without pretending it was never there. The mend was neat and visible. An old sadness rose in him. The sadness of days that felt small and had always been ashamed of their smallness. The hall swallowed the shame the way good ground drinks a drizzle. On the far wall, an inscription in letters small enough to kneel for. "The unremarkable is the city's backbone." He smiled. It reached his eyes without having to be told to. When they stepped out again, he noticed a change he could not at first name. Then he saw it. People, not many, not none, moving along their own streets, which sometimes were his, and sometimes crossed, and sometimes did not. Some faces he knew, as if from a dream, he had finally remembered. Others he did not know at all, and felt he had always known anyway. They did not startle at the sight of him. They did not arrange themselves to be seen. They walked, and their walking built. A man passed carrying a minute cup like a bird. He met the traveler's eye and nodded as one nods a neighbor, while both hold something fragile. A girl hurried past with a tiny wrench tucked behind her ear, hand stained with the clean grime of work. An elder paused to rest on the bench beneath the grafted tree and left a breath there that would be ready for whoever needed it next. "Then this is ours," the traveler said, not as a claim, but as an astonished acceptance. "Ours," the watchmaker agreed, "because mine is a hallway and ours is a city." They came to a long colonnade ending in steps that led nowhere and everywhere. From its height, the city opened, not vast as empire, not small as village. Exact, streets like sentences that had learned where to end. Squares like pauses given on purpose. Towers like memories that chose to carry rather than crush. Wherever his eye rested, something answered softly. "I've been made by choices. I will make choices back." He noticed ruins too, fragments of walls that had not held, arches that had cracked where a lie had tried to do the work of a truth. None were hidden. Vines threaded them. Children played along their edges and learned balance. Even the ruins had been given room to belong, so they would not need to reassert themselves as ghosts. "Nothing is erased," he said, not in fear, in relief. "Not here," said the watchmaker. "Erasure is for chalk. The city is stone. Stone prefers engraving." They descended. At the colonnade's base, a narrow mirror stood, the only mirror in the city that looked like a mirror. He braced, expecting to be measured again. The glass only offered him himself. Not corrected, not exaggerated, He placed his palm on it and felt beneath the glass the faintest tremor, as if another hand, his, met him from the other side. He laughed then, a small laugh, the kind roofs loosen for spring. "I'm not outside looking in." "No," said the watchmaker, and for the first time since the station, his voice warmed with something like delight. "You never were." They turned a corner and reached a terrace that opened over not land, not sea, but horizon, the same horizon he had once called desert. It was different because he was. The line the world draws between known and not known had softened into hospitality. Dawn did not rush. It consented. The watchmaker stood a step behind. "Say it," he murmured, not urging, not testing, inviting a sentence that wanted to breathe with air instead of only with chest. The traveler did not choose poetry. He let accuracy be kind. "The city is within," he said, "and the streets I walk build it as I walk." A ripple moved through the avenue below. Windows caught light and gave it, not hoarded. A bell some distance off answered without composer. The river under the stones quickened, and somewhere a door remembered how to open. He closed his eyes. At the edges of his hearing, a voice, the one the desert had once thrown back to him as silence, spoke. It did not come from sky. It did not come from earth. It rose from the whole of him, from the vows that had settled into foundations and the confessions that had become spans. It said only this: "Welcome home." He opened his eyes, and perhaps, the narrator's voice says, moving a chair closer to where you sit now. As you listen, you feel your own streets brighten, the way a room brightens when someone turns toward you without agenda. Perhaps a tower you feared was judgment reveals itself as a pillar that holds your sky. Perhaps a ruin you have hidden grows its first vine. He did not turn to see who else had come to the terrace. He did not need to. The city made it unnecessary to prove attendance. Presence proved itself. "Every moment," he whispered, the spring warm in his palm, the tempered gear humming in his chest, "is a vow." Nothing thundered. Everything answered. They descended from the terrace into streets that behaved like sentences learned by heart. No corner startled. No alley pretended to be more than it was. It was a relief he had not known to ask for. The relief of a place that does not lie. At the foot of the steps, the pavement changed, small hexagons of stone interlocked with bands of wood. The watchmaker tapped the wood with a knuckle. It answered with a tone that felt like a question well posed. "The city prefers joints that can breathe," he said. "Rigid seems crack at the first change of weather." They turned into a narrow thoroughfare lined with stoops. On one, a broom leaned. On another, a tin basin caught light like a kept promise. A woman came out, set her basket down, and swept. Not with impatience, not as display, but as if sweeping were a sentence she had decided to mean. Each stroke laid a clarity on the stone that did not shout. The traveler felt the breath in his chest lengthen with the rhythm of her work. "Is this architecture?" he asked, almost embarrassed by the smallness of the thing he wanted to praise. The watchmaker's mouth tilted. "If the city stands tomorrow, thank brooms." Across the lane, a man mended a chair on his stoop. He turned the chair over, drove a small dowel home, tapped it twice, then sanded the edge with steady, almost affectionate circles. He did not look up as they passed. He did not need to. The work consented on his behalf. The traveler realized he had arrived at the kind of seeing that does not require names to honor. They reached a square he had not noticed on the map in his mind. No fountain, no statue. Only a long table of stone, low to the ground, with slots carved along its surface. Beside each slot, a small brass plate bore a single word: bread, water, warmth, time, silence, repair. A boy no taller than the traveler's waist stood on tiptoe and slid into the slot labeled time, a minute no bigger than a seed. The slot took it the way soil takes rain. Across from him, an elderly woman placed a folded scrap of cloth in warmth. She rubbed the cloth between her hands first, as if unwilling to send it cold. The stone did not glow. It accepted. That was glow enough. "This is a market?" the traveler asked. "A market where nothing is priced," said the watchmaker. "Only promised. A bell, not the loud kind that calls a city to fear, but a domestic bell that calls a household to table, rung somewhere above them. People came without haste. Some set down what they had, some picked up what they needed. No hand hovered with calculation. If a hand did, the bell would not ring next hour. You could tell a city by what its bells refused. The traveler slid his pawn a minute toward silence, and felt the stone warm his palm in thanks. He thought of the bowls beneath the arches, the way not speaking had built roofs across storms. He placed the minute and did not label the recipient in his heart. The city was better at directing mercy than he. "Do you see now?" the watchmaker said, running a finger along the word repair. "Why eternity hides inside ordinary gestures. Grand vows crack where small vows hold." They moved on. The lane opened into a corridor whose ceiling curve reminded him of the underside of a bridge. On the left wall, a series of shallow niches held simple tools: hammer, needle, ladle, brush. Above each, a sentence was cut into the plaster: "Use me when you mean it." The traveler took up the ladle. It balanced in his hand as if it had been made for that exact hand. He set it back, not because it was not his, but because he had not yet promised the soup. At the corridor's end, they found a place both tender and daring, a school that had no doors. Children sat on the floor in circles. Adults sat with them, but not above them. A girl read aloud in a voice that held her words up without asking them to perform. Between sentences, she glanced at a boy whose hands fidgeted. She placed a finger on the page and waited. He breathed. She read on. The city had given them a minute with no hurry in it. You could build a century on such minutes. The traveler felt a tug at his sleeve. The child from the station stood there, the one with pockets that had chimed like small midnights. The same hair, the same eyes that could carry both mischief and mercy without contradiction. But her pockets now were sewn shut with a fine stitch, as if what needed to be given had been given and the pockets wanted a rest. You remembered to carry it, and then you remembered to wind it, and then you remembered to promise, she said by way of greeting, as if their last conversation had been 5 breaths ago. You were here all along, he said, not accusing. She shrugged the way leaves shrug when they receive rain. The city is not elsewhere. It is what happens when you stop insisting on elsewhere. Do you live here? He asked. I am a messenger, she said, as if that answered the question and all good questions. Messages live where they are needed. She handed him a small, folded paper. Inside, a line in a neat hand that might have been his, but wasn't. Let your hourly be honest. He smiled, and the smile did not correct itself. Thank you. Say it forward, she said, and was already listening to a boy explaining the shape of his fear to no one in particular. She nodded the way lanterns nod when they see a vigil finding its flame. The watchmaker led him to a colonnade that opened onto an atrium open to sky. In the center, a loom stood, not large, not ceremonial, functional. Threads ran from spindles at the perimeter into the heart where the shuttle moved. The shuttle moved without a hand. It wove attention into pattern. As they watched, a thread brightened, someone somewhere listening beyond their patience. Another darkened, someone speaking to win, not to give. The loom wove both. The cloth it produced was beautiful not because all its lines were one color, but because the darker ones insisted the lighter ones not be cheap. The civic loom, the watchmaker said, we do not weave only cloth. We weave days. Pieces of the woven cloth hung from a line. People took them the way you take a towel when you have washed. Not with fear, not with pride, with thanks. The traveler lifted a piece. It was soft where kindness had gone through, and stout where honesty had refused to thin. He thought of all the cloth he had worn that had been woven by hours he had not paid for. He put the piece back. Gratitude sometimes looks exactly like restraint. He wanted to ask the watchmaker 1,000 questions, each one a window. How did the city keep thieves from priding themselves on their restraint? How did it teach those who had injured to repair without making repairs a performance? But with each step another answer arrived, not by lecture, but by encounter. He saw a man leave a note on a threshold. I was wrong. He saw someone pick it up and right beneath, I know. We are still a we. He saw a girl tie a loose rope on a well and not claim the knot. He saw a neighbor water another's garden without anecdote. He saw a young couple lay their hands on the base of a small bell they had not yet earned the right to ring, and then step back, not because they were unworthy, but because the hour was not yet theirs. The city handled these gestures the way a body handles breath. In and out, out and in. No ledger, no trumpet, only circulation. They turned into a lane beneath a trellis of vines heavy with not fruit, but with 1,000 small, clear beads, condensation caught and kept. As they passed, some beads let go and fell into small bowls built into the wall. The bowls overflowed and emptied down channels that led back toward streets he had already walked. It took him a moment to understand. This water was the surplus of attention, what accumulates when many choose to be present. The city stored it, not to hoard, but to have ready for dry hours. Do we ever stop tending? He asked, not with dread. The watchmaker shook his head, glad and grave. Not if you want the city to stand. Rest is part of tending. Hiding is not. They reached a doorway that opened on the left into a kitchen that fed whoever needed feeding, and on the right into a room intimated by quiet. He chose the kitchen first. Hands worked there with a choreography that had learned each other. No one commanded. Ingredients knew their order because order had been practiced kindly. A ladle, the twin of the one he had held in the corridor, moved from pot to bowl with the rhythm of prayer. A man at the basin washed and did not resent washing. Resentment has a smell. The room had none. He crossed into the quiet room. Benches, a window that did not display the city so much as let the city display itself. On the far wall, a sentence in letters so thin they could have been hair. Attention is the form of love that forgets itself. He sat and let the sentence find its work in him. He did not try to help. Help would have been interference. When he rose, the watchmaker stood in the doorway, as some doorways stand when they are sure of what they hold. You have seen enough to mistake seeing for doing, he said without rebuke. The city will not ask you to build all at once. It will ask you for the next hour, and then the next. The traveler touched the spring and felt the tempered gear answer. The two rhythms were one because they were not competing. Then this is how eternity builds, he said, not by a monument, but by minutes that mean. By minutes that mean, the watchmaker repeated, as if fitting the words into stone. They walked into a corridor where streets met at thoughtful angles. A small arch spanned an alley. Above it, carved as if the stone had finally decided it was time to speak, a sentence waited. Every choice is architecture. He looked up and laughed without irony. The city had circled back to remind him where he began. At the square's edge, a child tugged his sleeve again. Another child, this one with a scar like a comma on her cheek. She held out a small key, not metal, but something like hardened light. For when you forget, she said, grave as only children are when they are being generous. He took it. It weighed almost nothing, but it rearranged the balances in his pockets in favor of promise. What does it open? He asked. Not doors, she said. Ours. Then she pointed toward a flight of steps, rising toward an avenue lined with trees that had learned to negotiate with wind. "Up there," she added, "is where you will hear your name say you. My name, the one you use when you stop borrowing other names." He looked at the watchmaker. The watchmaker nodded. "The city knows you now. It will not flatter. It will introduce." They climbed. The steps were easy not because they were shallow, but because they were honest. Halfway, he stopped to catch breath he had not lost. He turned. The city stretched, streets upon streets, rivers beneath, towers with graphs, ruins with ivy, kitchens with ladles, schools without doors, markets without prices, looms without hands, bells that sometimes refused. He felt the kind of gratitude that does not look for a recipient because it has already found one. At the top, an arch of air waited. It did not lead out. It led further in. He held the child's key, felt the spring warm and the gear hum. He did not ask what would happen. He had learned, finally, the difference between control and consent. And perhaps the narrator's voice says closer now. As you watch him lift that small key, you think of the smallest key you own, a gesture you could make today that costs little and means much. Perhaps it is a text you should send. Perhaps a silence you should keep. Perhaps a broom to take to your doorstep, the step of a city you are already building. He lifted the key. The arch brightened. The hour opened. He stepped through. The arch of air received the key without resistance. It did not swing open like a door or fall away like a curtain. It dissolved as a breath dissolves when it has finally been released. The traveler stepped through, and the light that met him was not brighter than what he had known, but closer, like a lantern moved from the end of a corridor to the table where you sit. The ground beneath was not pavement now, but soil, dark, rich, alive. He knelt and pressed his fingers into it. It gave without crumbling, holding the imprint of his hand, as if to say, "Your weight is not damage, it is belonging." Ahead stretched a grove. Trees arched their limbs to weave a canopy that filtered light into gentleness. Each trunk bore carvings, not ornamental, not boastful. Dates, names, brief phrases. The day I chose to stay, the night I confessed, the hour I forgave and meant it. He traced one with his fingertip and felt the pulse of that long ago hour travel through the grain into him. The city did not archive. It remembered as blood remembers. The watchmaker walked a pace behind. His silence was not absence. It was accompaniment. The traveler understood. Words would narrow what the grove intended to widen. Bird song threaded the air, strange, familiar. He realized it was not birds. It was the voices of those who had once loved him, speaking small sentences he had forgotten. A simple thank you. A weary I trust you. A quiet I'll wait. Each note flew from branch to branch, filling the canopy with music that did not perform but simply continued. He stopped, overcome. They were so small, he whispered, and therefore eternal. The watchmaker said, the first words he had spoken since the arch. They reached a clearing. At its center, a single pool lay still, glassy. No fountain fed it. No stream left it. It held only what was given. The traveler knelt beside it and saw his reflection, not as a mirror shows, but as memory shows. His face carried all the lines it had gathered, the weariness, the tenderness, the regrets alloyed, the transparencies learned. Behind his face shimmered silhouettes of those who had walked with him, friends, strangers, even those who had wounded. They were not intrusions. They were structure. His reflection spoke. Its lips moved as his did not. The sound rose from the pool, quiet but unmistakable. It said his name, not the name his parents had given, not the name colleagues had called, not the name enemies had spat. It was the name that had always hummed beneath his skin, waiting to be spoken by honesty itself. Hearing it made his knees buckle. He fell forward, tears striking the pool. The water did not ripple. It absorbed, holding him steady. "I've never heard it," he gasped. "Not once." "You have been hearing it all along," the watchmaker said softly. "Every time you listened, every time you confessed, every time you tended, the city whispered it. You were too covered to notice." The traveler pressed his palm to the surface. "It is me." The pool brightened, and his reflection shifted. Not younger, not older, but truer. He saw himself laughing without disguise, grieving without armor, walking without mask. For the first time, he did not wish to be another version. He wished only to be this one. A voice rose from the grove, from the pool, from the whole city. Not chorus, not multitude, but unity. "You are not waste. You are witness. You are vow embodied." He sobbed. The sob was not collapse, but birth. His chest expanded until it felt it might burst, but it did not. It carried. He looked up, and the grove parted to reveal a tower unlike the others. It did not reach upward. It descended, roots visible as walls, branches weaving down instead of up. At its base, a door of plain wood waited. Above the lintel, no sentence, no inscription, only silence. The watchmaker placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is the sanctuary. Beyond it, no guide walks with you. The city can only accompany you to the threshold. Within, you will discover whether you consent to live as you are named." The traveler trembled. "What if I fail?" The watchmaker's gaze was steady, merciful without softness. "Then you will be human, and being human will not end the city. It will simply give you another stone to set." The traveler touched the door. It was warm, as if many palms had pressed here before. He pushed. It opened without sound. Inside, no grandeur. A small chamber, a chair, a table, a candle already lit. On the table, a book bound not in leather nor cloth, but in something like woven breath. Its pages were blank. A quill rested beside it, its nib glistening though no ink pot sat nearby. He sat. The chair fit him perfectly, not because it had been built to measure, but because it had been built to welcome. He lifted the quill. "What do I write?" he whispered. The watchmaker's voice came from the threshold. "Not what you want others to read. What you need to know is true. Write your vow." He pressed the nib to the page. Ink rose from within, dark and luminous at once. His hand shook. He wrote slowly, each letter deliberate. "I will live without hiding." The words shone. The page absorbed them, then held them, refusing to fade. He turned the sheet. The next page was blank. He wrote again, new vow, trembling but steady. "I will forgive without erasing." Again, the page glowed, settled, kept. He turned, wrote, "I will spend my minutes as if they are citizens, not coins." Each vow became stone in the city, beam in a roof, thread in the loom. He felt the whole architecture answer. Bells rung, rivers quickened, trees breathed. His vow had become brick. He wrote until the candle leaned low. He wrote until the quill grew warm in his hand. He wrote not to complete a ledger, but to continue a life. When he laid the quill down, the book closed itself. He touched its cover. It pulsed once, then dissolved into him, not leaving him burdened, but leaving him inhabited. He carried not only vows he had made, but vows he had promised to continue making. He rose. The chamber door had closed without sound. He did not try to open it. The sanctuary does not release by exit. It releases by presence. When he turned, he was already outside. The watchmaker waited, eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "It knows you now," the watchmaker said. "And I know myself," the traveler answered. His voice did not shake. Together, they stood on the threshold of the grove. The city spread around them, luminous, transparent, alive. Yet he knew it was within. He pressed his hand to his chest, and the hum answered, the spring, the gear, the vows. He whispered, I am citizen of the city that is me. The watchmaker inclined his head as one bows to appear. And of all of us, the horizon called. Not desert now, not unknown. Invitation. The horizon was no longer line, but invitation. The desert that once pressed endless silence against his bones had softened, dissolved, reformed into an expanse that welcomed rather than threatened. It was not erased, it was transfigured. Sand had become foundation. Mirage had become avenue. Waste had become witness. The traveler stood at the city's edge and turned back once more. Behind him stretched towers that breathed, rivers that remembered, trees that grafted shadow into fruit, kitchens that fed without pride, markets that promised without price. Yet even as he gazed, he knew the city was not behind him. It was within. Every vow he had spoken, every regret he had tempered, every mask he had set down had been brick and beam in this place. The watchmaker joined him. His face bore no triumph, only the quiet joy of a craftsman who sees material accept its shaping. You have walked through presence, through gratitude, through regret, through transparency. And now you see, each was not a test apart, but a street converging here. The city is not destination. It is the citizen becoming city. The traveler's eyes filled. Then the journey is never finished. The watchmaker shook his head, not in negation, but in glad affirmation. Never. Cities breathe as long as breath consents. You will keep laying stones as you live. So will I. So will we all. They walked together toward the terrace that opened across the horizon. The sky leaned close, not heavy, but companionable. The traveler placed his hand over his chest where the tempered gear hummed and the spring pulsed steady. Beneath them both, he felt the quiet strength of the vows written in the sanctuary, not bound to paper, but to pulse. At the terrace's edge, he stopped. The desert stretched outward, but it was no longer barren. Green traced itself where footsteps had once feared to tread. Streams glimmered like silver seams. Ruins of his old silences rose in the distance, but vines threaded them. Children's laughter carried across them, and no ghost walked there now. He closed his eyes, and the voice rose again, the one he had heard only faintly in the grove, now unashamed to speak. It was not above him, not beneath him. It was through him, of him, beyond him. You are not waste. You are witness. You are vow embodied, and you are not alone. His knees bent, not in collapse, but in reverence. His forehead touched stone that did not feel foreign. Thank you, he whispered, for being patient while I arrived. The air stirred, a wind without edge, carrying not command but consent. The watchmaker laid a hand on his shoulder. Rise. You have heard your name. Now live it. He stood. The desert did not disappear. It widened into horizon, which is another word for mercy. And perhaps, as you listen now, you feel a stirring in your own chest, a street forming, a tower breathing, a window brightening. Perhaps you remember a moment you thought too small, the broom against the stone, the ladle at the pot, the silence held instead of harm. These are not footnotes. These are avenues. You're already laying bricks. And perhaps you remember, too, the shadows, the hours wasted, the masks worn, the pride disguised as virtue. Do not hide them. Offer them. They will temper into steel. They will graft into fruit. They will weave into cloth. The city is not elsewhere. It is here, built breath by breath, choice by choice. The eternal is not hidden behind clouds. It is hidden in kitchens and benches, in the way you touch another's sleeve, in the words you choose not to sharpen, in the vows you dare to keep for more than a moment. Look now, as the traveler looked, and see. The desert that frightened you is already dissolving. In its place, horizon. In horizon, invitation. And perhaps one day, when you pause long enough to hear it, you too will catch your true name spoken. Not the one written on documents or shouted across rooms, but the one whispered every time you live without hiding. That name will not judge you. It will welcome you. The traveler turned to the watchmaker one last time. Will you leave me now? The watchmaker's eyes softened, carrying eternity without weight. I was never beside you. I was always within the vow. Wherever the vow lives, there I am. The traveler smiled. His face did not need to pretend. His city shone behind him, within him, before him. He stepped toward the horizon, and the horizon stepped toward him. Neither swallowed the other. Both widened, and perhaps the narrator's voice murmurs closer now. You realize you have been walking your own city all along. Every breath of brick, every choice an avenue, every regret a stone waiting to be tempered. You're not late. You are here. The city waits for no one because the city is always waiting. Build, belong, be seen. The traveler looked once more into the infinite distance. He did not see an ending. He saw continuance. He whispered, with the steadiness of someone who knows his vow is not perfect but true. Every moment is a vow, and the city answered, not with thunder, not with trumpet,